record this. Um, so welcome to week one of composition and visual design. My name is Randy Baker. I'm the course director. If you watched the video, you know a little bit about me, but I've been doing this for about 45 years. I've been here at Full Sail for about 4 years. I'm still a working industry professional. I'm a what's called a slash, a producer slash director slash DP slash editor slash lighting guy slash writer slash tech manager slash consultant. I do a lot of jobs. But lately, over the last 4 or 5 years, I've been doing a lot of Nat Geo stuff, supervising, producing, and directing and DPing a lot of their reality shows. Secrets of the Zoo, Dr. K's Exotic Animal ER. And so I've done a tremendous amount of production over the last 40 years, everything from feature films to indie films to documentaries to short films, music videos, commercials, a lot of episodic television, just a ton of episodic television for I worked for a couple years for MTV when they first started, and then Nickelodeon for about 10 years. I've ran big production companies and ran big corporate production companies. So I've been around and done a lot. I'll be the first to tell you that I know enough to know there's a lot I don't know. So even after 45 years of doing this, there's still a lot I don't know. But I'm really good at research. And so if you have a question I don't know the answer to, I will tell you I don't know the answer to, but I usually can give you the answer to it in a relatively short time. I know this camera that you're using, the FS5, extremely well, probably better than just about anybody uh, in the United States, except for a couple people. Rob Scribner, who is the guy, if you watch the Sony website, you'll see the great 120 frame a second fire footage. Rob is a 2014 DCBS graduate who won the Gordon Willis Best Documentary Award by the American Society of Cinematographers for his senior thesis in DCBS. And from that, Sony called him and said, "Hey, we got this new camera that we're coming out with. We're looking for somebody to do the first film in North America." So he actually shot the very first film with the FS5 called Zion that you can see in the vault in week one. So, but I worked with this camera every day for the last 4 years, or a version of this camera, and I actually own one, and I also, if you couldn't tell, I collect cameras. So I have this little fascination with cameras. You can see my office is pretty much, and it goes on and on and on and on. Currently I'm up to about 2,000 still cameras and probably about almost 1,000 film and video cameras. So it's kind of an obsession of mine. Um, so I'm a very technical kind of guy as well. Um, yeah. My wife calls it a bit of hoarding, but I said hoarders don't have it this well organized. So, but I've been doing it for about 5 years. I worked on a show called American Pickers the very first season, and then I did a spin off of that called Picked Off, and then did a series called The Longest Yard Sales Show, and then did a series called Tags to Riches. So there were all those antique shows. So I was constantly around all these antiques everywhere, and I started collecting cameras. And before I knew it, that was it. I actually got my first camera was I traded an Xbox for a Nobulo and Bolex film camera from the vice president of development for the Do-It-Yourself Network, who was here, and his kids were coming to visit him, and he didn't have an Xbox, and so we did a little trade out. That's what got me started. So if you as you get to know me, you'll know that I'm one of those people who I live and breathe film and television. People, my hobbies are collecting cameras and creating artwork out of cameras and shooting still photography, and I do a lot. And then like I said, I'm still working in the industry, and probably not as much as I did just a year ago. I've kind of slowed down a little bit because of the amount of students. We've doubled our class sizes now, so that makes it a little bit more difficult for me. But you'll see me going in and out of shoots almost every week. So we're going to go through a lot today. We're going to go through the 4 weeks of the course, and then we're going to go through the week one shooting assignment with you. kind of walk you through week one. And then at the very end here, if you have any questions about the camera or the menu setup, we'll kind of go through that and walk you through that. Now, a lot of this you're going to have to learn on your own. I'm here for you, but there's a lot of information that we've given you on how to operate the camera, how to set up the camera. So first thing you need to do, and we'll talk about this, is you need to set the camera up with that FS5 Mark II menu setup guide. Now, just know that we started shipping these Mark IIs about 4 months ago, and before that we had the Mark I's. And so there's still a lot of information like the videos that you were sent to look at on Vimeo or YouTube. The walkthroughs, those just go through the button switches and knobs. So, make sure that you understand that there's also a video online there about the menu. That's the old camera. Only use the in the PDF, the menu video and the PDF that I send out to you. Otherwise, you'll get lost because things have changed between the old cameras and new cameras. Externally, in the buttons, switches, and knobs, they're pretty much the same. The only difference between the two cameras externally is that on the ND dial on the Mark II, there it's black, and on the Mark I, it's silver. And right below where it says Sony on the left side of the camera, on the Mark II, it says FS5 Mark II, and on the Mark I, it doesn't. So that's what we're going to be going through. And if you have any questions, I want to make this as interactive as possible. Don't hesitate to ask a question. I'll try to keep an eye on the chat room here, and every now and then I'll stop and go through. So first thing we're going to do is I'm going to take you through kind of the class. I'm teaching 3 sections of this. Thomas Hayek is teaching the 4th section of this. Thomas is working in our film department here and has graciously come in to help me teach this. He's an incredible art director on films. And he teaches, like I said, the campus version of composition and visual design, which is a little different, but same type of things. They shoot with a Canon DSLR. You guys get to shoot with and own a Sony FS5, which is pretty remarkable. And I just have to say that going into this, I work with a lot of really good DPs, both film and video DPs that have been around for a long time. And they always ask the same question. I always get the same question. How do you teach digital cinematography online? And a lot of people, including some people I know here at Full Sail, don't think that that can be taught very well online, but it can. And so when I talk to them and I say, look, all of our students get an FS5 camera, they all are kind of in shock. They're like, wait, every student gets an FS5? And then they have to turn it back in at the end of the class. I'm like, no, they get to keep it, and it just kind of blows them away. So it's only about 1% of colleges in the United States actually give students their own cameras. So you're extremely, extremely lucky to be in this program. We have a lot of people transferring over from the film department here because of that. So it's a really kind of a cool thing that you guys get this camera. And this camera, you may not realize it now, but this camera is going to open up a lot of doors for you in the next couple months here. Especially once you go out and start looking for work, or you start looking for internships or production hours. This camera, you're going to find that, especially if you're in a smaller market, this camera is probably going to be better than some of the production companies' cameras that you go and try to get a job with. So it will open up a lot of doors. So that's it. We'll go through the 4-week overview in a second. I just want to talk a little bit about the class. Most of you saw the email I sent out last Thursday. I didn't mean to scare anybody. I know a lot of people were a little intimidated by that letter, but I just want you to understand that this is a different class than you've had up to this point. This is the class you've been waiting for, where you're going to start shooting. And so you're going to shoot every week. I mean, it's just that from this point on, you're kind of going to shoot every week. And you got to realize that. So you're going to be spending more time doing, homework, shooting from this point on than you have up to this point. So just understand that you're going to have to put in about 20 hours a week in this class. Just the way it is, and that's what you signed up for when you signed the student handbook policy. That's what it says. It's about 20 hours worth of work. The production part of this will take you about 4 or 5 hours, and it will get easier as you go along. But especially in the first couple of weeks, there's just a tremendous amount of information that we're throwing at you. The class is actually 3 classes in one. It's supposed to be composition and visual design, and we do go through, starting in week 2, we do go through kind of the basics of composition. and visual design, and we talk about what those are and how to use them in video. But we're also teaching you the technical aspects of photography and cinematography, which are really important. And we're also teaching you how to operate this camera and the tripod and the light kit and the audio, everything that goes along with that. So that's why it becomes a little bit harder, because all of a sudden we're throwing this, high-end digital cinematography camera at you and say, oh, by the way, you're going to be shooting with this at the end of the week. So here's the key to all of this. You're going to make mistakes on this. You're learning a new visual language, and it's just like learning anything else. It's like learning another foreign language, or learning a musical instrument, or learning a new sport. I would not give you a saxophone and say to you at the end of the month you're going to be playing a concert at Carnegie Hall, or I wouldn't give you a highlight racket and say at the end of the month you're going to be playing a professional highlight match. Just wouldn't happen. But I would give you a saxophone and say, okay, I'm going to teach you the basics of how to play this, and at the end of the month I want you to play a little short section of a song, and you should be able to do that. It's the same thing. And so it's a lot like learning a new language, a foreign language. This is a visual language. And so there are a lot of things that are in common to each other. And you just have to realize you're going to suck at this at first. And your stuff is going to look pretty bad at first, but that's okay. That's okay. And so the big thing I want you to take away from this is that you got to give yourself permission to make mistakes. If you're like me, instant gratification isn't quick enough. I want to learn stuff right away. I don't want to have to learn something over months or years. I want to know it now, but that's not going to happen here. Just not. Just not the way that this works. So you got to give yourself permission to make mistakes. And Yoda, from Star Wars, said it best: failure the best teacher is. And my mentor used to say to me all the time, look, you got to have something to learn from. And so making mistakes is a natural part of learning. You make the mistakes, you learn from it, you move on, and don't make those mistakes again. That's what we look for in this class. What we don't look for is making dumb mistakes by not reading or watching the material, not following the directions, not proofing your work, that kind of stuff. You'll get crucified in this class for that. So the philosophy of this class is really kind of simple. I treat this as just like a working environment. I mean, being in the business 45 years and running shows and stuff, I work with a lot of crews. And so I treat you just like I would any other crew that I work with respect and reverence, and with a helping hand. I'm here to teach you how to do this. But I expect, some hard work out of you guys, and it's going to take hard work in this class. You've probably cruised through a lot of other classes up to this point. This is not that class. Because of the amount of information that we're giving you, and because of the production schedule, you'll be shooting an assignment, one assignment each week. You're going to have to really get a handle on your time management. If you're not big on time management, if you're the type of person who waits to the last minute to kind of read you look at your class on Thursday and, figure out what to do over the weekend and then try to cram it all in 2 or 3 days, you're not going to do well in this class. I can promise you that. First of all, the assignments are laid out throughout the class. And the completion assignments, where you just have to read and select that you've completed it, those are auto-graded, meaning that if you don't do them on time, there's no leniency. You don't get a late policy on those. It's not like you get 10 points off if you're a day late. If you don't complete those on time, you just get a 0 on them. You're 0. And they're only worth a couple points, 2 points, 3 points here and there. But, man, those add up. In the kind of the course overview here, especially because of the professionalism thing, which is worth 10 points, and then the Sony camera packages and the media management thing, and then week 1, there are enough points that if you don't do those on time, you almost lose a little over an entire grade point off the top of your grade. So you got to make sure you're doing this. So, one of the things we're going to talk about is time management, how important that is. You want to front load your classes. And so the big thing that I can pitch to you here is that every Monday you should open up your classes, and you should go through, and on your calendar or your smartphone or your iWatch, whatever you use, you need to make a schedule, and you need to put alarms in there to say, okay, this is doing that this day, because it will come back and bite you in the butt pretty hard if you don't do that. And I've seen a lot of people not pass the class. They did well on the shooting assignments, but they missed all the completion assignments and didn't pass the class. So it can have that severe an effect on your grade. So just a warning to you that you need to really be on top of time management. The classes are laid out. It's a 4-week class, and each class is laid out. So at the beginning of each week, I give you an overview of what that week is all about. And then there's a invite for these live classes, which we hold every Monday at 4 o'clock. And then there's a archive video of that is posted. I'll post the video of this by tomorrow morning at 9 a.m., which you can go back and look at. Even if you've attended the live class, you should kind of open that up, because sometimes I put documents and stuff in there that we talk about in the live class. So that are just additional documents on like how to build a beanbag camera bag, or a list of rain gear for the camera, or a list of LCD hoods, or how to do time lapse on the camera, things like that we don't teach in the class, but they're just ancillary bits of information that are helpful to you down the road. Then there are the completion assignments, and there are a couple of them. In week 1 here, we have one on the lighting, where we kind of go over a little bit of the light kit. There is one on media management and how to set up a file structure for the rest of all 4 weeks, and then you want to keep those file structures. A lot of the stuff that you're using in this um, grading, hopefully. No, again, I'm reading these responses. So just to stop for a second and answer some of these questions. Robbie's saying, how's the grading on projects? Well, you'll find that I grade a little bit different. Thomas grades a little bit different for me, and then Kyle, who's one of the other instructors grading, he grades a little different. I give written and video feedback. Not everybody does that, but again, you will find that I'm very lenient if you're making mistakes learning stuff. I'm not lenient at all if you make dumb mistakes by not following the directions or not read. It becomes, because these are production assignments, it becomes very obvious right away if you watched or didn't watch, or read or didn't read the instructions and the stuff that we send out to you every week. It's very clear. It's crystal clear, especially in these live classes, because they'll give you information that won't appear anywhere else. So if I don't see you doing that in your assignment, it's a pretty good clear sign to me that you didn't watch the live class, and you'll get crucified on the grades for those. But we don't expect you to be Roger Deakins or Chivo, or an Academy Award winning DP. You're learning this stuff, and it's like I said, I'm not going to give you a saxophone and have you play Carnegie Hall in a month. But I will give you this camera, and I'll say, okay, we're going to start you off by shooting one shot, and then we're going to shoot a couple other shots, and then more shots. So it's actually pretty easy to learn if you follow along. It becomes a very difficult class if you don't have a technical background in photography or cinematography. We'll teach you that information, but that's just another layer of information that you need to kind of add on to top of this. A lot of the stuff, I shouldn't say a lot, most of the stuff that you're shooting in this class, you're going to be using down the road in other classes. It's called recombinant programming. So you need to make sure that you set up a file structure that we'll go through in the media management section of this class, and that you put all the raw footage and the edited footage and the still images and stuff within that. Every piece of video that you shoot is going to have audio in it. You're actually going to shoot 30 or 40-second clips of video, then you're going to import those into Premiere Pro, and then you're going to export out a still image from those. So it's pretty simple, and it's, in this first class here, it's easy for me to teach composition and visual design with still images. Once you get into motion, it becomes a whole nother thing. So we're gonna concentrate on static images instead of moving images in this class. Really, this is all about learning how to tell a story visually with a camera, and that's what we're really trying to teach you this week. Couple other things about this class. Everything in the class has to be turned in as a PDF, a best quality PDF. If you haven't converted things to PDF, you have an option when you convert it. It says a good, better, or best quality. You always want to make sure it's best. I won't accept anything that's not a PDF. If you turn in even extra credit assignments and stuff like that, if you turn it in as a Word doc or a Pages doc, I just won't accept it, and you'll get 10 points off the assignment, and it will be kicked back to you to redo. and turn it back in as a PDF. It has to be a PDF, and you're going to find that's pretty much the general rule from this point on at Full Sail here. And it has to do with it's harder to you can go in and change things in PDFs, but the general concept is that if you turn it as a PDF, there's not an argument about, oh, that got changed somehow, as opposed to a Word or Pages document. Plus, it's really a pain in the butt to grade Pages documents. So don't turn in Pages documents or Word documents. So let's go through the class. Again, the structure of the class is you've got the class overview, the weekly overview, the live class invite, the live class archive video, all the completion assignments, and there's usually 2 or 3 in each week that you just have to read and complete that you've read. And then there's the shooting assignment, and the shooting assignment is made up of a couple different elements. First thing is a discussion element, and we made these a discussion element. So, for example, if you look at week 1, again, week 1's a little different here. We have the 4-week overview, we have a student map and a mentor program, which I'll go through. Professionalism thing that you got to make sure that you sign. It's 10 points, so it's really important that you sign that. We give everybody 100 points if you just complete this. But if you have late assignments or you don't turn things in and stuff, we deduct points off of this every week. So just be aware of that. There's a hardware and software checklist that if you don't have any of the equipment or any of the software, you got to let me know by tomorrow. If after tomorrow you're calling me telling me you don't have Pages or you don't have Premiere Pro or any of that stuff, or any piece of gear like an SD card reader or your white card or stuff, that's on you at that point. You have that won't be used as an excuse any longer. I have to know that you don't have it by tomorrow so I can help you. I sent everybody an email out last Thursday with a lot of this information in it, saying that you needed to go through the equipment and make sure you went through this hardware software checklist. You need to be able to do that. Just so you know, today, the 28th, Safari Books is actually changing to something called O'Reilly Learning. You've probably seen stuff on Full Sail 1 or announcements that have been sent out to you. Unfortunately, they're right north of San Francisco where the big fire is, and so they've had to evacuate their facility. So the rollout has been kind of delayed. There's some things not working on O'Reilly Learning. But it's a great new platform and something that we'll be using down the road here. In week 1 here also, we have the Sony FS5 camera package, and then we go through a little bit of thing about media management. And then here's what a normal week looks like. It's the live class invite, the archive video. In this week we have a completion assignment on the basics of lighting. And then we have a completion assignment that is a precursor to the shooting assignment on how to do the 3 core competencies that we're going to be teaching you this week on how to focus, expose, and use the white balance workflow. We have a proprietary white balance workflow that we're going to teach you how to do. And then there's one on how to import your footage into Premiere Pro and export a still. Just a couple words about that. We'll talk about that when we get in it. And then we have the shooting assignment. And the shooting assignment, like I said, is made up of 2 different elements, a discussion assignment and the shooting assignment. We made it a discussion assignment so that everybody can see each other's work. That's the only way we can see work here in the FSO. The FSO is something we call the LMS. It's a learning management system. The FSO is Full Sail's proprietary learning management system. So you'll hear me talk about FSO, which is, again, what you're looking at here and how you see it. And here's what it looks like for you guys, probably a little bit closer. And then the other thing is the LMS. You'll hear me refer to it as LMS. It's all the same thing. So in the week 1 assignment, for example, in every week assignment, there is the first 2 paragraphs of each of the assignment. This is called the assignment overview. The assignment overview, the first 2 paragraphs go over the discussion and the reply. In this class, the discussion is a 100-word, at least 100-word critique of another student's work. If you don't know how to do a peer-to-peer critique, you might want to look at some peer-to-peer critiquing models, and there's a bunch of them out there. A really popular one is called the RISE model, R-I-S-E, and that was actually written by Emily Ray, who's an instructor here in the MCBS program at Full Sail. It's used throughout the world. It's really well known, and also I'm introducing another one in week 2, as we get into this, I'll introduce you to one of my own. That's a little bit easier, I think, than the RISE method, but it's a easy way to teach you how to give feedback for another student's work. And it's really important that you understand how to do that. And this is not just busy work, So I got to explain this every month to people who I always have people say to me, why are we doing these discussions and these replies? I mean, it sounds like just busy work to me. It's not. They're not at all. There are multiple learning objectives tied into this, and it's really important that you understand what these are. And so the critique, being able to look at another person's work and break it down, is really, really important. The really good DPs and directors that I know can look at any piece of any shot and tell you exactly how it was shot and why they shot it this way and what they would do different and what they like about it and stuff within minutes. I mean, just by looking at it. And that's a very valuable tool. So if you think about it this way, if you can break down an image, then if you reverse engineer that, it's the same thing as what goes into making an image. It's really that simple. So it's important that you learn how to critique and break down an image. Really important. Now, the other part of this is getting to know other students. The whole point of this peer-to-peer communication, which is the discussion response, is that you're getting to know these students in the online world. Organically, this would normally be happening in a brick and mortar classroom or working with other students on a set, where you'd be exchanging ideas and saying, hey, look at this, or I love that, or I just read this last night. And so there are two parts of this. There's peer-to-peer communication, where you're getting to know the other students and you're bonding with the other students. And we talk about the importance of this, and most people again blow this off as busy work. But here's something to think about. If you actually look back at the first films of Steven Spielberg and George Lucas and Quentin Tarantino and Francis Ford Coppola, good examples of those, all USC and UCLA grads. If you look at who the crew were on those first films, they were all people they knew in their film school. So get to know who these people are. If you don't know of Frame.io, which is a big collaborative filmmaking site, you should get to know those things. Collaborative filmmaking is a thing that used to be just in the domain of large movie studios because it was really expensive. But today, with new software like Frame.io and others, you can collaborate with other people around the world. And you should start doing that with your classmates here. You're going to be spending the next 19 months with, we've got nearly 100 students in 4 sections. And so you've got 100 students that you can feed off of. And one of the things that we did was we started a Facebook page on this. Let's see if I can get that up. I just want to show it to you. And you guys should all sign up for this Facebook page. Of course, I'm not going to be able to find it now, but I will. I thought I had it up here, but I don't see it. I will find it. David Pace. David, are you here with us? Yeah, David did it. Let me just bring it up real fast here. David Pace. Yeah, here it is. So this is the Facebook page, and I will send this out to everybody so you can see it. And so just make sure that you sign up for this. It's a private group, and what I found is that already we've got 11 members, which is great. What I found is that you guys tend to carry this on to other classes. Now, again, this is another way of doing peer-to-peer communication. You're learning from each other. And the second part of this is the reply that we're going to talk about, and that's peer-to-peer learning. And that's another important part that, again, organically you'd be getting working with other students on a set or in brick and mortar classrooms. But here it's really, this is how we do this. And so you will find that you can be using this as a study group. And for some strange reason, I find that, some students would prefer to ask other students questions like, how'd you all set up your camera bags? I'm not a huge fan of it. But those are important questions. If you don't feel like talking to me about it, put it up here and share information. I really stay out of these groups. Every now and then I'll go in, and if somebody posts something from Full Sail that to students, I will dump it in here for you guys. Or I get a tremendous amount of information across my desk every day from the industry because I'm involved in a lot of different professional groups and a lot of different bloggers, and I look at a lot of different things. So anything that's really cool, I'll dump on here for you guys to see as well, as a way to get you into that habit of looking at different blogs and websites and stuff. So it's really important that you kind of understand that these discussion responses, and again, it's a 100-word critique of another student's work, and then the second part is the reply, which is a educational link to a tutorial, a video, an article, an infographic, anything that you found while doing research on the subjects that we're studying for the week that will help other students learn from it that you thought was really good. Again, peer-to-peer communication, peer-to-peer learning. And if somebody responds back to you, respond back to them. I give extra credit for people who do multiple responses to other students, and because you need to get to know how to do this. And in last class, it was really cool. Towards the end of the class, I saw them, exchanging, things. One guy was a graphic artist, and the other guy was an editor, and he said to you, look, if you do my opening for my little film, I will, help you edit yours. So it was kind of cool to see that stuff going on there. One thing before I forget, don't upgrade to Catalina. We had a couple of people last month who had major problems because their computer asked them if they wanted to upgrade, and they said yes. So anyway, it's a discussion assignment is a response and a reply every week, and I actually give you examples of what these should look like. So every week, the first couple of paragraphs of the assignment overview will be this, and then I'll give you examples. Here's the response. Here's the educational link. Now, for the educational link, we also want you to tell us, just don't post the educational link because you'll lose 5 points. Each of these are worth 5 points, by the way. If you just post the link and don't tell me what the link is about, where you got it from, don't say YouTube or the internet. I want to know about the blog or the website that you got it from. Tell me a little bit about that, why you chose to use it, and you got to kind of sell it to other students. What should other students look at learning out of that? Robbie's saying, yep, I have Catalina and cannot operate anything without it. So we had problems with people being able to use Pages last month, Robbie. So make sure you open up Pages and try to use it. And we had problems with people being able to use Premiere Pro. So again, go through the hardware software checklist, look at the software, make sure that Catalina is working with that. If not, we're going to have to do some workarounds on that. Actually, 2 of the students ended up retaking the class because of it. So just be aware of that. Great. Okay. Well, yeah, they're fixing bugs right and left, and you can see they've been sending out warnings now for a month here saying don't upgrade. So let's jump back into this, and I just want to go through. Let's see if I left out anything that I needed to go through. The assignment overview. So there are no outside readings in this class. There's a lot here that you can read, but nothing that you're required to read. There's a lot of information, ancillary information that I give you to help those who want to learn more. So what we find in these classes are there are 3 types of students. People who've never picked up a camera before or shot with anything, don't know anything about the technical aspects of photography or cinematography. People who have a little bit of experience, have shot with like DSLRs and stuff, and know a little bit, but don't really know much about composition, visual design, or how to white balance, or all those things. A lot of people who shoot in auto and everything. And then we have about a third of the students who are actually working in the industry, either at government or church or places like that, who just want to come back and get a more formalized education. All of you have picked up bad habits because you are a point and shoot generation. Everybody has a high-end 4K camera usually in their pocket right now. So what you are used to doing is going, oh look, I'm going to take a photo or video of that, click, 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 and never to be seen again, or without any thought about why you're taking it, or what you're taking, or when you're taking it, or where you're taking it. We want you to get out of those bad habits. So a lot of what I'm doing is retraining you to stop doing bad habits on this. So that's the shooting assignment every week, and we'll go through this. And then the other part of this is every week there's a extra credit assignment, and I do the extra credit assignments because a lot of you are coming into the class probably with a 4.0 grade point average, and you'll hit the first assignment and you'll get a C or D on it, which will devastate your grade. So because it's different in this class, as I said, so I give you lots of opportunity to make up for bad grades in this class. The extra credit assignments are usually take about an hour to do. The first week is just a survey. The second week you have to do some 5 blogs, mobile apps. The third week is a time lapse. You have to do a time lapse, and the fourth week is an exit kind of poll. So very simple things. They are designed to take an hour to do, but they'll give you 10 extra points that you can use anywhere in the class. And then every week there's a vault. And the vault is just my way of giving you, for those people who want to learn more, we talk about the vault, what it is. It's different every week, and it's just an aggregated resource of information out there. So here's my philosophy, and you'll see me do this in the class. I go through and I really look at all the great videos that are out there. And there are a lot of really good ones. And quite honestly, teaching 100 students, I don't have a lot of time to do new original videos. I'm constantly doing it, but it's a struggle. And so what I do is I go out and I look and see how other people have taught it that are really good. And then I aggregate that down so that there's a lot of crap on the internet. There's a lot of really bad information and misinformation. And you'll see me point that out in your educational links that you give to me. I will tell you whether or not it's a good or bad video. And there are a lot of bad ones. When you're doing that educational link, before I forget to say this, stay away from photography. Do cinematography and videography. Don't be sending me stuff on photography because some of the concepts are different. So if you really want to learn this stuff, you need to be concentrating on videography and cinematography. So if you're doing a link and it's for something that's from a photography site or about shooting photographs, you'll probably lose some points on it because I'm asking everybody not to do that. So in the vault each week, I aggregate the best of the best, and I constantly update this. And so as you'll see, here's one on composition and framing. Here's some stuff on the histograms. I just finished a new 34-minute video on histograms that I'll be sending out to you guys. There are tons of resources about the Sony camera. There's all kinds of links on here, camera links. There's all the user groups for the Sony cameras on Vimeo and Facebook and Twitter and Focus Pulling and YouTube. And here's XDCam user that you need to get to know this site. This is Alistair Chapman. You'll see a lot of his videos on the Sony Pro site. He's probably the leading expert on the FS5 camera in the world. And a really nice guy, British chap who's a engineer who turned DP. And he's branching out now. He's actually making stuff for the FS5, like a lens hood and a lens protector and stuff, 3D printed. Here's some FS5 pages from Sony Pro site. Get to know the Sony Pro site. There's lots of great videos on advanced stuff for the FS5. Here's some hands-on reviews of the FS5. Here's some newer stuff on the FS5 Mark II resources. This is Alistair Chapman did this 2.5-hour workshop on the FS5 that he allowed me to post on here, and he actually gave me the whole breakdown of it. So if you want to look at, how, now this is for the older camera, but pretty much stays the same. There's some things that are different. And here's a FS5 training from Vortex Media. What's the guy's name? Doug Jensen. I'm not a big fan of this because they rent it to you for 6 months. I went through it when they first came out with it. I'm just not a big fan of anybody who rents you videos and 6 months the thing went out. That's a whole new trend that you're seeing people like Shane Hurlbut and Easy Med, things like that are big workshop places that are, you sign up and rent the videos. It's just crazy for me. Some of the big boys on here for camera accessories like Adorama and B&H and Sony. There's some stuff, Zacuto. These are things about where you can get accessories for the camera. If you're looking at shoulder rigs, which you're not going to be using in this class, there's some shoulder rigs in here. Here's some lower cost shoulder rigs that these are thousands of dollars. These are a couple $100. And then there's a bunch of stuff on picture profiles, and we'll You'll learn about picture profiles. They're baked in looks in the camera that we use. They're kind of similar to LUTs, which are lookup tables, which you hear people talking about more and more. And they're just basically baked in looks that you put on the image to give it a specific look or feel. So there's a bunch of them. Your camera has 10 picture profiles. We're using picture profile 2 in this class, but down the road you should get to know it. And here's some information about Rob. Like I said, Rob is he's your typical DCBS student. Him and his wife have a production company in Iowa, not in New York, not in LA, not in Chicago, in Iowa. And he again won the 2014 DCBS American Cinematography Gordon B. Willis Heritage Award for Best Documentary. This is a huge award. I mean, it's akin to like winning an Academy Award almost. And there's some stuff on here on the Vimeo page, and then there's some stuff about the student award, and then there's the his backstory. But you should also check out his Warbirds, which was his student thesis, which started all this, and then the Zion, and then if you look at the Sony Pro pages, you'll see that 120 frame per second slow-mo fire stuff that he shot. And then on here, there's also some big boys. These are all the equipment, major equipment companies: Able, B&H, Film Tools. If you don't know Film Tools, you should go there. It's like Toyland for film and video people. Adorama, Sammy, EVS, Rule. And then there's some rental companies. Down the road, if you want to rent lenses, these are really great lens rental companies. You can rent a lens for like, 60, 75 bucks for an entire week. So if you're looking at buying a lens, I would highly suggest that you rent the lens first to make sure it's what you want from one of these companies. Plus, most of these places have blogs, and we'll be giving you a lot of different blogs. So that's just the vault. It's different every week. Again, you don't have to go through this. There's no points involved in it. I had somebody call me months ago and say, I'm so overwhelmed. I've spent 8 hours going through the vault, and I've barely gotten through a small portion of that. How do you expect me to do this entire thing in a month, let alone each week? And I was like, look, this is, you don't have to do this. This is just aggregated information for you. So that's it. So let's talk a little bit about how the philosophy of the class for a second, because I think that's really important. Again, this is different from any other class that you've had. And from this point on, right now, from this point on, you have to approach this class differently. Like I said, I approach it as a real world situation where I'm the client and you're the person working for me, but instead of getting paid, you're getting a grade. So that's kind of how I look at this. And so I'll treat you like that. If you do great work, I will praise you. If you do horrible work, and I will tell you what you're doing wrong and be supportive of you. If you do work where you're just simply not reading and watching the thing, I will call you out on the carpet about it. I won't hesitate to do that. And I would do the same thing with the crew I'm working on, because you need to know this stuff. This is all core competency stuff. And when I talk about core competencies, what I'm talking about is everything that you're learning in this class is something that you're going to need to know down the road in every other class. So if you don't get it now, it's going to affect your performance in all the other classes down the road. So it's really important that you put as much time and effort as you can into this class and make sure you're getting this. And again, I won't let you get through this class if you're not getting it because of that. It's not good for you. It's not good for me. It's not fair to other instructors down the road. If you get out of the class and don't know how to focus, expose, and white balance this camera, that's not going to happen. So you can't get through this class unless you know how to do that. So week one's assignment, for example, is a prerequisite assignment. If you don't pass that assignment, it gets kicked back to you automatically. If you don't follow the directions, and it's obviously that you haven't read or watched the stuff, it gets kicked back to you, and you have 2 days to reshoot the entire assignment. If after 2 days you don't get it back in, or you turn it back in and it's still not right, um, they'll give you a 0 on it, and but you still have to get it. Then you'll have to set up a 2-hour one-on-one go-to meeting with me, and you have to demonstrate in that go-to meeting that you know how to focus, expose, and white balance the camera before I'll let you go on to week 2. If you don't get week 2's assignment in by that Wednesday of week 2, you automatically fail the class, and you can't do week 2 until you do week 1 correctly. So I can't fail you by not doing these things, but I can give you grades that by week 2 you won't have enough grade points to pass the class. So you cannot move on in this class unless you know how to do these 3 core competencies that we're going to be teaching you this week, which is exposure, focus, and white balance. So you need to pay really close attention to that. So let's go through this. let me talk a little bit more about the philosophy of the class real fast, because I think it's important. So from this point on, you got to stop thinking about these assignments as homework. They're not homework anymore. This isn't homework anymore. This is you doing camera tests and going out there and shooting digital assets that are going to help you get a job or find clients. That's period. That's it. Everything you shoot from this point on is all about getting a job and finding clients. No other, it's not homework. And so if you approach this as homework, you're going to do horribly in this class. I can guarantee you. You got to look at this as you know, this is not homework anymore. This is you producing digital assets. And the other thing about this class is that you need to really begin to treat it more like a mentorship. Take advantage of the experience that you're going to find in the instructors coming up here. I've got, a lot of experience. Again, I'll be the first to tell you I don't know everything, but I know a lot. And I love you. You're not going to find anybody who loves this industry as much as I do. I live and breathe this stuff. So take advantage of that and learn from that. If you have questions, call me, text me. You know, emailing me is tough because if I'm working, I'm on a set all day long. I check my emails twice a day. If you text me, I check my text every hour. So texting me is the easiest way to get a hold of me, not emailing me. If you email me, it may take me a couple days to get back to you. I try to do it within 24 hours, but realistically, if I'm shooting and I come home and I start grading all night, it may be a day or two before I see your email. So text me if you need anything. There is. Lewis was asking a question about, is there a section where we can learn how to use this camera for streaming? I will give you some resources for that. We don't cover that in this class. Your mind would melt if I threw that on top of everything else that you're doing. And that's in the networking section of the menu but I can send you some information about how to do that. You can actually stream live with this camera if you have a router and a internet connection. There's an Ethernet 20, there's a BNC connector on the back, and there's also an Ethernet 100, not 20, and also a HDMI cable on the back. Now you can also use this camera to stream to your cell phone or your iPad, so you can use that for a monitor. And there's a couple pieces of software, CRM software, that you need to download that's free from Sony. And there's another piece of software called Catalyst, which is Sony piece of software that's an editing platform, but also it's an MXF file reader. What you're recording on this camera is called MXF files. And so you can't play them back on what's the Apple player? I'm just blanking on it. Too long a day already. But you can play it back on QuickTime. You can't play it back. Thanks, Robbie. QuickTime, of course. You can't play back on Premiere. You can't play back in Premiere Pro and Final Cut Pro and Avid and DaVinci Resolve. Those automatically have MXF players built into them. But you can download this free software from Sony called Catalyst. Starts with a key. It starts with a C, and you can play back full frame video, and that way you don't have to take it into Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro. So before I forget to talk about this, we are an Adobe Sony school. Just know that. So our philosophy here at DCBS is you need to know how to use multiple nonlinear editing systems. Our preferred nonlinear editing system is Premiere Pro. You're going to have 3 editing classes down the road, and they're all going to be teaching you Premiere Pro. So if you're a Final Cut Pro editor or a DaVinci Resolve or an Avid editor, start learning Premiere Pro, because you're going to be using that a lot in this degree program. But again, our philosophy is you need to know multiple ones. And for me, Premiere Pro and DaVinci Resolve are the 2 big ones. If you don't know about DaVinci Resolve, you should, because it is going to soon, already is actually going to become the top nonlinear editing system in the world. And that's because DaVinci Resolve is also the #1 color correction software in the world. Most major motion pictures use it to correct their software, correct their images. And Brent, the guy who owns Blackmagic, he's the guy, Blackmagic owns the cameras and DaVinci Resolve, is a brilliant guy. I mean, just one of the smartest guys I've ever met in my life. And what he's doing with DaVinci Resolve is blowing everybody else away. And his philosophy is this: he doesn't want you to round trip. If you don't know what round tripping is where you edit in one nonlinear editing system like Premiere or Final Cut Pro, and then to go to DaVinci Resolve, go to maybe like Audition or SoundForge or some other program to do your audio, and then go to DaVinci Resolve to do your color correction, and then your graphic effects in another program, and then you come back into Premiere Pro or Final Cut Pro to do your final, delivery. Uh, his philosophy is you should stay in one program. So he's offering DaVinci Resolve, which is out of beta now. DaVinci Resolve 16 is out of beta. For so that you can do everything. You can edit, you can do audio, you can do graphics, you can do color correction, and you can do final processing all in the same program, so you don't have to jump in and out of it. So it's a big new thing, and the cool thing about it is you can download DaVinci Resolve for free. There's some limitations for it. You can do color correction and editing, but it doesn't support full 4K yet, uncompressed, and you don't have access to the graphics and the audio. You can buy the entire DaVinci suite, DaVinci Resolve suite for $300. I mean, he's made it extremely, extremely cheap. If you buy a Blackmagic camera, it comes free with the Blackmagic cameras. So I own a lot of cameras. But I have the Blackmagic 2.6K, the Blackmagic 4K, Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, and the Ursa Mini Pro. I like the Blackmagic cameras. I think they're pretty good. The Ursa Mini Pro is one of those cameras that really hit, and the new 6K Blackmagic Pocket Cinema camera, it's kind of blowing everybody away right now. I'm not a big fan of the form factor, and there's a lot of stuff going on with that. But you need to be using Premiere Pro is the bottom line on all that. Uh, one of the things, back to the philosophy, no, not homework anymore. I don't accept partial assignments. So if you turn in an assignment without a camera report or missing behind the scenes images, or you're missing one image, it gets kicked back to you to redo, and you get late penalties. You got 2 days to turn it in. No partial assignments. You got to complete assignments correctly and completely. Grading, because of the type of feedback that I give on grading, it can take up to 5 to 6 days for me to go through, the 70 to 80 students that I have in my 3 sections. So, and I try to rotate each section every week. So if you're the last one that I get graded in week 1, you'll be one of the first ones I grade in week 2. So, but sometimes it will take 5 to 6 days to get feedback to you. If you need feedback, or if you're shooting and I haven't given you feedback, just pick up the phone and call me or text me and say, hey, I'm getting ready to shoot tomorrow. Can you do my assignment? And I will jump on that. Likewise, I give a lot of feedback. My videos are usually 15 to 35 minutes long, and then I give you concise written directions. Usually, a lot of times, I'll actually take still images. I take everything into Lightroom and I mark it up. I show you what you did wrong, how, if it's crooked, I straighten it for you. If it's underexposed, I show you how many stops it's underexposed. I can tell you how many degrees off you are in your white balance. I can show you what different compositions would look like if you framed it differently. So it's a very interactive kind of a learning environment, and you will get a lot out of it. It's a lot, so, couple thousand words of written feedback in a 35-minute video will take you a lot of time to go through. If you're the type of person who doesn't want to do that, just let me know, and I will definitely not put that much time into it. But I think it's important in these first 4 weeks that you really understand what you're doing right and what you're doing wrong. And I don't just blast you about all the things you're doing wrong. I also tell you what you're doing right, show you what you're doing right. But it's a really good example of how to do that. Because of this is all, there's a lot of subjectiveness in what we do here. So I just want to say to you that the way that I grade is a open dialogue. So I may look at something like, and I'll tell you a story. Let's see if I can find it here real fast. In one of the assignments, there was a shot. Way too many stuff in here. There was a shot where they had to do a foreground object. Well, the week 1 assignment, actually, basically what it was. a foreground object and a background object. And so the student shot a big boom box, and he had a collection of boom boxes in the back, which was really cool. He shot a boom box, and he had an alarm clock next to it, and then some boom boxes, but the boom boxes were, too dark in the background. So I called him out on saying, okay, you're supposed to tell me a story with all three layers on this. So I took some points off because it was a boombox and a alarm clock, and then the boombox is in the back. I was like, your mid ground with the alarm clock, that didn't make sense to me, what it was. And so then I talked to him. He called me and talked to me and said, well, it's Flavor Flav. The whole thing was Boombox and Flavor Flav, who wore those big alarm clocks around his neck. And I was like, okay, I get it. I get it now. So I gave him back points. So the point of all that is this is an open dialogue discussion. There's a lot of subjectiveness in it. I try to keep that out, but there is a lot of subjectiveness in what I say to you. So if you don't agree with me, let me know. That's okay. Um, uh, and then the biggest thing about that we want you to take away from all this, the biggest philosophy, and this is the number one core learning objective that we want you to really take away from all of this, is you don't take an image, you make an image. You make, create, or build an image. You got to get out of the bad habit of just going out and taking images without really thinking about what, when, why, where, or how you're going to shoot those. That's not what we do. So that's what amateurs do. That's not what professionals do. And one of the biggest differences between professionals and amateurs, you hear me talk about this over and over again, is a professional will know exactly how they're going to shoot it before they go out. So by the end of the month, what we want you to come away from this is, if I give you a shot and say, I need you to shoot a medium shot, you know exactly, what focal length you're going to shoot it at, what aperture you're going to shoot it at, what your depth of field is going to be, what your ISO is going to be, what your shutter speed is going to be, what the distance is you're going to be away from that subject that you're shooting, and what the white balance is going to be before you even think about picking the camera up out of the bag. You should know all that stuff by the end of this month. And so that it's a big leap from where you're at right now, but that's where we're trying to get you to. So that's the whole thing. And again, the biggest hurdle that most of you will have to get over is this simple thing about taking versus making an image. And you'll hear me rant and rave about this over and over again, especially when I'm grading. I'll be telling you, look, you just went out and took this image. You didn't really think about your background. You didn't think about your framing. You didn't. So on top of all the technical aspects, in week 2, we start adding the composition on top of that, and that's where it gets really kind of interesting. And again, it's all about telling a visual story. You only create an image for 2 reasons: to tell a story, number 1, and evoke an image. So with that being said, the starting place for every image that you take in this class should always be a strong story with a strong singular focal point that enhances the story, all working together to create a visually interesting image. That's the starting point. So that's where I begin grading that. Is it a strong story? Does it have a singular strong focal point that enhances the image? And so if you follow that guideline, and the reason we do that is because anybody should be able to look at any image and within a second or two tell you exactly what the story and the focal point is in that story in the shot within a second or two. If you can't, it's probably not a good image. It's really that simple. So you always have to be thinking about what's my story and what's my focal point. So the focal point, for those of you who don't know what a focal point is that one element within a shot that really says, okay, here's what the shot is about. Let's see if I can kind of show you some examples of that. So the focal point in the shot is the cup. It's got the most visual weight in the shot. It's in the foreground. It's in focus while everything else is out of focus. And again, you can see that here. It's the cup. The cup is in focus. The background's slightly out of focus, and midground, background completely out of focus. But even if we do something like this, the bridge is the focal point here. It guides you to everything in the shot guides you to the bridge. So that's what we're talking about. If you look at people, it's always the person in the shot. Person is always the focal point of the shot. So if you're shooting people, it's always the focal point, and the part you focus on is always eyes. Anything with eyes, you focus on the eyes always. Anytime you're shooting a building or something like this, you always focus on entrances or doors. So the focal point would be right here on this particular shot. So that's your focal point, and the building, tells you about where you're at and what you're shooting. So that's focal point. That's what we want to get across. That's basically it. A couple things about your equipment. Any questions so far? A couple things about your equipment you should know. You're responsible for your gear. So you might want to look at maybe looking at renter's insurance. We have every couple months we have somebody have their equipment stolen. Unfortunately, that's on you at that point. You know, you're responsible for the equipment. It's a $6,000 camera, so you basically, to continue in the program, you have to get another camera, and you have to get the FS5 because that's the camera that we use. So you're responsible. If the camera breaks, you're responsible for it. If it's a warranty issue, the Sony will cover it, but it's going to take a while. But so basically, what I'm saying to you is take care of your equipment and be careful with it. A lot of camera thefts out there. Somebody's going to look at that and go, it's small, it's lightweight, I can grab that, snatch it, and be off with it in a minute. So don't turn your back on the camera. We've had a lot of cameras stolen out of cars. Don't leave the camera in the car. If you have it in the car, put it in the trunk. Um, and the other thing I want to tell you about your equipment is that you don't need any additional equipment to shoot the stuff in this class. Everything you need, you have. Now, that doesn't mean that down the road you're probably not going to want to look at buying additional equipment. Once you get this equipment monkey on your back, it's kind of hard to get it off. So there are things that you're going to probably need to look at down the road. And those include another SD card, another battery for the camera, because this is a small battery and they make larger batteries. Before you buy anything, talk to me. I can save you hundreds of dollars on anything that you're going to buy. You might want to look at batteries for your light kit, because your light kit will take batteries, but we'd have to raise your tuition if we gave you batteries for those. A holder to hold your reflector with, sandbags for your light stands, rain gear for your camera, LCD hoods, external hard drive, where you need to start storing your footage down the road here. So there are things like that that you will need to or want to buy down the road. But again, you don't need any of that for this class. Everything you need, you have. So don't feel like you have to go out and buy anything. Again, we talked about treating this like a mentorship program. And the other thing I want to talk to you about is that you're going to need to start, you're going to need talent in week 3. You're going to need 3 people in week 3 that you got to shoot. So it got to be 3 different people. So you've got 21 days to find 3 different people and confirm them. If it gets to week 3 and you're calling me saying my talent canceled on me, or I don't, so that means you got to have backup talent as well. So that's not an excuse anymore. It's part of the real world shooting situation that you're going to be in. You got to learn how to book in talent, So send out emails to them saying, hey, I've got the shoot plan. I just want to confirm with you. Download a talent release from the internet. There's a ton of them out there, just to make it a little bit more official and say, hey, I need you to sign this talent release before we begin. All those things tell the person that, hey, they're serious about this and I need to really sign up. And when you book them, tell them, look, I have to have you there. If you're going to commit to this, you have to do that. Any camera shop will guide you, but either way, what's the best thing I could do to clean the lens? So that's a good question. Let me just jump off that. The best way to clean the lens is not to get the lens dirty, period. I'm in the middle of finishing up a huge article on lens cleaning, and I've talked to all the major rental companies in the United States, and you'd be surprised that, the depth of what it means to clean. So a couple things about that. First of all, don't let your lens get dirty. Keep, if you're not using your lens, always have the lens cap on it. If you're not using it, anytime you have it in the bag, it should have the lens cap on it. Always keep the lens hood on your camera. If I see the behind the scenes image and you don't have your shotgun mic or your lens hood on the camera, you actually get 5 points taken off. The lens hood is going to protect your lens. It's a $600 lens, so if you scratch it or bang it up, you're going to have to spend $600. That lens hood will protect it, and anytime you don't have the lens hood on, no matter where you're shooting, you're going to get glare in your lens, which is going to deteriorate the image quality. So that's it. The second way to do that is you want to have a ball blower. That's like they were talking about. Let's see here. Here's a ball blower. This is what they look like. So let me get my camera back up. That's it. It's a ball blower. What you want to avoid doing is touching the lens. But that doesn't mean if you got a fingerprint or something on there that you don't want to do that. If you're using, let's see if I have any lens tissue here close by. Now, if you need to get lens tissue, or you need to get a microfiber cloth, and you need to get professional lens cleaning solutions. I usually carry a whole thing of lens cleaning stuff in my giddy bag. Um, Although I usually have some in here. Yeah. So, for example, here's Roscoe lens tissues. These are specifically made for cleaning lenses. You can use microfiber cloths, but here's what I found out that I really hadn't thought about before. A lot of people will take those microfiber cloths and they'll put them in their pocket. You don't want to do that. So if you're using a microfiber cloth, you need to put it in a plastic bag and then keep it in your pocket. Because if you clean the lens, even if you clean the lens with the microfiber cloth, and then you get material on that, and you don't clean that material off, next time you clean the lens, you're just actually scratching that lens, putting that material back on the lens. So if you're using microfiber cloth, you got to be careful. You got to keep it clean. That's why I generally tend to use lens tissues. You don't ever want to spray lens cleaning solution directly on the lens because it will eat the protective coating on the lens. You always want to spray it on the lens tissue at all. The weird thing I found in researching this article is the differences between whether you start in the middle and go out when cleaning, or you start on the outside and go in when you clean. There's a big difference between the two. And the pros and cons are, if you start in the middle and do concentric circles out with it, the problem becomes is not every lens is sealed completely. So you can push that dust and stuff into the lens on the edges. That's the con about starting in the middle. If you do it from the outside and go in, then you tend to leave some stuff in the middle of the lens. So I always, spray my lens tissue, clean it, and then take a clean lens tissue and then buff it out starting. So I clean it going from the outside in with the wet lens tissue, and then I buff it out going from the inside out with another one. Never use compressed air on it. It has oil in it that will eat away the coating on the lens. So there you go. That's like everything you need to know about cleaning your lens. It was funny. I said to somebody at Lens Lens Pro to Go, which is, they have great blogs on this. I said, well, what about if you have something like, I used to shoot a lot of redneck shows, so I had always having mud on the lens. They said, well, I said, what about if I just can't? There's something on the lens. He goes, I take my fingernail and I scratch it off. So I wouldn't recommend that, but that's it. Same thing with keeping your lens on your camera. The entire camera goes down into the camera bag all at once. The entire thing goes down. Shotgun mic, you put your lens cap on, the lens on it. You don't take your lens on, you don't tear the camera down each time. The camera bag is designed so that the entire camera put together goes in there. So you always want to make sure that your camera's off when you change the lens. Because it creates an electromagnetic field that creates dust. You don't ever want to really clean the sensor. If your sensor gets dirty, you want to take it in. Unless you're really good at it, you have to have sensor cleaning brushes to do it with. And that's it. Don't use those lens pins that you see. Don't use those things, because again, if you get dirt on those and you go to clean it, you're rubbing that in. Yeah, great. The talent release form is really, and when you send somebody a talent release form, it just cements the fact that you're serious about it. That's all we're trying to do with that. Also, the sliding plate. What do you mean by the sliding plate, Abdul? Do you mean the camera plate on the camera? We'll go through that when we get through that. Let me get through the class here first. So, talent, we talked about talent. So let me kind of go through this. Here's the 4-week course overview with you. And if you haven't read this, again, this is a lot of the same stuff that we went through in the thing. There's a whole video introducing me. Here's a 4-week calendar. So this will tell you when assignments are due. So make sure that you kind of follow that. And there's a download version of that. Talk about time management, the hardest class, the live class, which you got. The live class and the assignment overview are the two things that are mandatory. You either have to attend the live class or watch the live class video and read the assignment overview every week. Everything you need to know to do the assignments correctly are in those. How the class is run, how we grade things, subjectiveness, best tips, time management, attend the live class or watch it. Carefully read the assignment overview. Stop thinking about the class's homework. turn in the assignments on time and completed. I don't accept partial assignments. And don't forget to have fun. You'll hear me say that all the time. Don't forget to have fun. All the photos you see in here are usually my photos or student photos. Um, Subjectiveness, there's a lot of subjectiveness in the class. So realize that. Make sure you have the camera set up for the FS5 Mark II menu setup guide. Uh, we go through all of that in here, what it needs to go. I go through that multiple times in week one. Week one is a prerequisite assignment. I told you about that. Don't take the learning objective. You want to be creating and building a shot. We talked about in week two, we're going to get into something called a pre-visualization workflow and a visual checklist. In week one, you'll have this mental little visual checklist that is my image straight or crooked? Is my image in focus or out of focus? Is my image too dark or too bright? Is my image too orange or too blue? Those four things you got to be thinking about. Mostly common sense, but you got to be thinking about those things as you shoot. You got to follow the directions. There's a lot of directions, and so it's easy. And don't get stressed. Now, here's the thing I got to tell you. Don't try to absorb all this at once. You will freak out. Your brain will melt. Take it one step at a time. And so, again, this class is designed to take you step by step through this. So it's not something that you are going to. Some of you are going to have problems with certain things. That's okay. All the three core competencies, focus, exposure, and white balance, is if you spend an hour practicing these, not going out and trying to shoot while you're practicing, but just practicing it, an hour on each of these things. Don't do it all in the same day. Do an hour one day on each of those things. In 3 days, you will become proficient at doing those three things. You won't master it, but you'll become proficient enough that you'll know how to do it. And that's all we're asking. So you got to put that time in, period. You got to put that time in. So, but don't stress about if you're not getting it. If you're not getting it, set up a one-on-one go-to meeting. In week one and week two, I usually do about 20 to 30 one-on-one go-to meetings with students who just, for some reason or another, just not getting it. So again, take advantage of that, and and I hear the same thing after every time they come into the go-to meeting going, I can't do this. I'm going to drop out of the class. It's just too much information for me. I'm just not getting this. By the end of the go-to meeting, they're like, man, okay, this is very doable. And I'm a lot less stressed. So I can help de-stress you. You just got to make sure that you reach out to me. You're going to spend about 20 hours a week on this class. It's going to take you about 4 to 5 hours to do the shooting assignment. Each week, the shooting assignment will get shorter. The one shot you're going to do in week one will probably take you as long to do as the 4 shots you're going to do in week two. Yeah, again, that's it. Just know that my job is to help you. That's what I'm here for. My entire existence here is to help you reach your dream. Here's the student map. We have a DCBS student map. So if you open this up, it will show you where people are in the DCBS program. Right now, you're working on you're going to be the sole person doing these things. It's a one-man band kind of thing. But, production is really not an auteur sport. You need to start building a crew of talent and crew people to help you. So one way to do that is look and see who other DCBS students are in your area. But because of privacy issues, we can't tell you who they are. But if you sign up for this map, you can easily see that. So I would highly suggest that you sign up for the map. Okay, so let's see the questions here going together. Yeah, you could keep the sliding plate on there too, if that's what you were asking, Abdul. The question: I use like a time. If I use like a time travel story, like a watch as my focal point in the foreground, time travel books in the middle, with some sort of background, would that be some? Yeah, exactly. And we'll go through that. We'll go through that with you as well. I'll show you how to do that. It doesn't have to be a cup. And I keep saying that, but I'm going to show you stuff. We also have a mentor program. If you down the road, you're a little new to this right now, but down the road, if you want to become a mentor to other students and you think you know the camera pretty well and got this down, you can sign up. And Ronald Diltz, who you had in Portfolio 1, is the guy that's running this. So think about that down the road. You get GPS points for that. And then, of course, here's the whole professionalism thing. I would be remiss if I didn't talk to you about making sure that you understand there is a dangerous weapon policy. There's an no alcohol whatsoever. Now, we just revised that this week so that you can show alcoholic bottles in the background of your shots as long as you're not showing people drinking. You can't show the intent to drink. But if you're doing a nice wine shot with, grapes and a wine glass with a wine bottle in the background. But again, just realize that if you can't show logos and stuff. If you don't have permission to use anything, logos or TV screens or video games or anything like that, really not supposed to be showing those. Just understand that. No drugs of any kind, illegal drugs of any kind. Vaping is okay. We had 2 people last month. Both of them worked in vape stores, so they did their environmental portrait in week 3 in a vape store, which was cool. That worked. And you can't shoot anywhere around train tracks. No, we won't accept any train track shots. If you don't know who Sarah Jones is, look up that story. She was a assistant camera person who was killed on Midnight Rider, the Allman Brothers biopics that was shooting in Georgia a couple years ago. On a train track illegally, a train will be on you in 3.5 seconds moving at 60 miles an hour once you hear it. It's that fast. And so they were on a bridge illegally shooting on a train trestle. Everybody got off, but there were props on the train trestle. The bridge hit the props. The prop hit Sarah and killed her. The director, the production manager, and one other person went to prison over it. It was a sad story, and so it changed the way that we look at things. The whole point of this, this stuff is to protect you. Last year, there was a group of filmmakers in Indiana, student filmmakers in Indiana. One of the guys got shot because they were using a prop gun. They forgot to, they didn't have a weapons specialist on set. They didn't have notify the police. Somebody called the police and said there were guys robbing a grocery store. That was all student film. And police showed up, saw the guy with the gun and shot him and killed him. You can't do that. And he can have like guns in the background on a wall. You can have swords in the background on a wall. You just can't be using that stuff. You can have a big knife if you're cutting up a steak, but you can't have a big knife that you're going to use to stab somebody with. So it's common sense stuff. So just think about that. There is a late policy here that I adhere to pretty strictly. And here's my policy on this. I'm pretty flexible. If you need extra time, you just got to let me know a couple days before. If you call me the day of and say I'm going to be late, yeah, you're going to get. I'll let you turn it in late, but you're going to get late penalties. Just understand that. And then if you, but my philosophy is this: you are taking an online degree program because you need the flexibility. And so if we can't be flexible, then shame on us. So if you call me and say, look, work is just killing me this week and I need a couple extra days, to do this, that's fine. As long as I know you're working on it and you're doing that, I will give you the time. But you got to let me know a couple days in advance. You can't call me at the last minute. So just be aware of that. I'm flexible to a point. But there is a reason that we have deadlines. And if you don't turn it in on time, you will get point deductions. It's just that simple. Understand what grading is. We talked about let's go back into this. We talked about, so by clicking that you've completed this professionalism agreement, you've agreed to this policy. Again, we give everybody 100 points, 10 point on this, and if you are late or have issues going on, we start deducting points from that. So you can lose those 10 points in a month. Make sure you go through the hardware software checklist. This includes making sure that you've opened up all the software in here as well. You have to have your shotgun mic plugged in and working on every shot. You got to be recording ambient audio, just natural sound of the room tone, it's called, because you're going to be using that down the road in other classes to build soundscapes with. So you got to make sure that you have that. Make sure you go through this and have everything. Make sure that you've opened up Apple Pages and know how to use that. Make sure you know how to open up Premiere Pro and open up a project. This is something that you need to start learning on your own. We'll go through a little bit with this, and we're not really editing in this class. We're just exporting the still. Next month, you'll be editing a short little doc film. So you need to know how to do cuts only editing by next month. So now is the time to start working on this. And there's some the tutorials in the assignment on how to export a still. And in week 2, we have a more advanced Adobe assignment as well for you to look at. And then Adobe Portfolio, and make sure you know how to do this. Now, anybody not know how to use Creative Cloud? Okay, so I just want to show you this. If you go up here to the top of your computer, there's a little thing that looks like a checklist, a little pretzel. I'm sorry. Would it be better to text or email to give you a heads up regarding scheduled medical situation? Just give me a text. Yeah, this is great. So if you click on that little pretzel, you get this drop down menu here. And these are all the Adobe pieces of software that you have available for free to you. There's all of this stuff. Plus, if you go in here and look into photography, you got Lightroom, Photoshop, Lightroom Classic. You want to use Lightroom Classic for this class in week 4. There's Camera Raw, so you have access to all that, and then some web apps. Adobe Behance Portfolio. You're going to use Portfolio in week 4. Adobe Stock, where you can download free stock footage, or you can sell your stock footage to Adobe. And then Live is educational tutorials. There's again Illustrator, InDesign, Acrobat, InCopy, Dimension, Bridge, all kinds of fonts you can download. Adobe Color, which is the color correction, Spark and Portfolio, and then Video and Motion. Again, Premiere Rush. If you haven't downloaded this for your iPad, you should. You got After Effects, Animate, Audition, which you're going to be using next month. That's the audio program. Prelude, Media Encoder. So you have all the stuff in here that you have access to. So there's no excuse. And this is just by clicking on this. So all you got to do is either open it or install it. That's all it is. So make sure that you understand how to use that. Also, make sure that you know how to get into Lynda, and that you know how to get into Safari Books. Like I said, that is now changing to O'Reilly. You should be getting stuff out there. And we have a music library called Westar Music that you can download free music and free sound effects for you. There is a lot of pretty severe limitations to that. You can only use it while you're in school. So if you use it on a program or a video or something you do, and then after you get out of school, you can't use that music anymore. So there are other music programs out there. If you're interested, let me know and I'll send you a whole list that I made up of that. So that is the hardware software checklist. Make sure that you go through it. And then we get into the Sony FS5 camera. So this is really what we're going to be doing this week. You're going to be setting up this camera. Here's the Sony official website that goes through everything that you need to know about the FS5 Mark II. It takes you to the FS5. It talks about all the stuff. There's an overview. Here's the new Venice look. This is picture profile number 1, or if you have your picture profile off, which is how the camera's set up right now. You'll need to change that to 2. This is the Venice look. Here's the Rob Scribner 120. The new Mark II has a couple of different advances on it. One of them is continuous 120 frame a second slow-mo. The camera will still do 240 frames a second at high def with a 14-second cache that just keeps recording over and over again. And you can also record 480 frames a second or 960 frames a second at slightly, I taught him how to do that, by the way. Light your hand on fire. There is those 2 higher speeds are slightly under HD quality. And then there's S&Q, slow and quick on the camera, which is your time lapse and your kind of slower mo kind of stuff, not super slow mo. So these are considered super slow mo. This is all Rob stuff shot at 120. But this continuous 120 frame a second is a big thing. And then the other big upgrade on the Mark II is that you can record uncompressed 4K RAW to an external recorder, which is that puts that up there with the big boy cameras. And then there's some stuff on here, high frame rate recording, and then HDR. Picture profile 10 is the HDR picture profile. You would only use that if you're outputting to an HDR monitor only. It looks like crap on anything else. Talks about the 4K sensor, all the A-mount flexibility, built-in electronic variable ND filter. We're not using this in the class because you won't understand how to use ND filters if you start out with this. We're going to start with preset. It talks about the new picture profiles on here and the clear image zoom. Sony also, this is another thing we're not using in the class. Sony has built in a 2x digital zoom. So the lens is an 18 to 105 lens. If you go into the clear image zoom, you can make it an 18 to 210 millimeter with a little bit of loss on the long end. But again, if you use that in this class, you're not going to learn how to use focal lengths correctly. So we don't want you to use the clear image zoom. So no 2x image crop and no clear image zoom on this. But what I wanted to show you is down at the end here, there are all kinds of videos on here. If you go all the way down to the end, shooting video tips. This is Lynn Denny's shooting video tips, insights, latest firmware, shooting raw. Here's a really good, this is Alistair Chapman's video again on shooting picture profiles on the camera. This is going through the Mark 1, so the picture profile 1 is a little different. They don't have picture profile 10 in here, but it will show you what each of the picture profiles do in the gamma curves and the color modes on each of those and what's recommended. Those are the things that the picture profile does. And so there's lots of stuff. Now, the cool thing about this is if you go to the bottom of this after you go through each one, there are additional videos down here that don't exist. So there's lots of resources there on this. So that's the Sony page, and you should get to know that page pretty well. There's a lot of stuff in there. And then as we go down through here, most of you have already gone through the unboxing and the assembly video from Sony. And then this is the FS5 menu setup guide. This is what you need to set it up. You need to use this PDF. There's a video, 34-minute video for the Mark II. You need to make sure you're using the Mark II video, not the Mark I, because it's different. First thing you need to do is on the top of the camera here, there's a green button called the full auto button right there. You want to make sure that's not lit up green. If it is, everything in your viewfinder will have A's in front of them along the bottom, and you won't be able to adjust anything. So you want to make sure that's turned off. And then the next thing you want to make sure you do is you want to make sure that you have this manual and auto focus switch set to manual. It needs to go down instead of up. Otherwise, you won't be able to adjust your focus on the camera and won't be able to set the menus. And then we go through how to set the menu settings. And there are two ways to toggle through the menu settings using the select set dial on the left side of the camera. It's a dial that if you push it in, you can select it. And then on the back of the right handle, there's a black multi-function toggle switch just to the left of the sign button number 5 and right below the record button that you can go back and forth, left and right, up and down. And if you push it in, you can select it. Those are the two ways you navigate through all the menu and through the settings of the camera anytime you're trying to change anything. And then we go through the menu setup, and it's color-coded. Anything in red, you need to change. Anything in an orange, you need to change before you go to the thing in red. So like here, for example, you need to change to picture profile 2 before you can set your low to 640. If you have it in picture profile 0 or off, you can only go to 800 on the low. So you got to change that first. You got to change your auto ISO limits. You got to change your white balance. This is a huge one you got to change. You got to black balance the camera with the cap on. You only need to do that once. Don't use anything purple you're not using. Don't use this zoom set. You need your steady shot off when you're shooting on a tripod. Again, we talked about the picture profile. You need to set it up as XAVC, not, there's 3 record formats on the camera, AVC HD, which is lower quality, 35 megabits a second HD. There's XAVC, which is a broadcast quality, 50 megabits a second HD. And then there's QF, quad filled XAVC, which is the internal 4K. Now, the thing you got to realize, and the reason why we're shooting XAVC instead of quad filled 4K is because the QF, XAVC, and the ABC, the lower quality and the higher quality, are 8-bit 420 color space. So you're not getting as good a quality out of that. Whereas XAVC is 10-bit 422 color space. So if you're going to be shooting and editing and distributing in HD, this is the format you want to shoot. And of course, we're shooting 1920 by 1080 is the resolution, 24 frames a second. There are only 3 record formats that we record audio to in the North America, 24 frames a second and 30 frames a second, which are considered to be like film. 24 is really what feature films are shot at. 30 and 60 are television frame rates, but you won't be able to tell the difference between 24 and 30 really. And then 60 is what you would use if you're shooting sports or something because you're recording twice the frame rate. And then the P stands for progressive. If you're in 60, you can record either interlaced or progressive, and it's just a whole technical thing. And then this is the data rate that you're recording to the camera. So if you look at your SD cards, let's see if I have an SD card in here. I'm sure I do somewhere. Um, by the way, big changes going on in here's one right here in hard drives. This is a 500 megabyte uh, SSD drive. You can see how thin they are. This is what I use now. Super fast, and you can see I have probably about 20 or 30 of these, as opposed to down on the bottom over here, I have stacks of hard drives. But back to this. If you look at this, you see there's a number on there. It says 90 right there. That number is the data rate that the card can handle. So you're recording 50 megabits a second on this camera, so the 90 can handle that. If you're at QF XAVC, it's 100 megabits a second, so your card that you have won't handle a whole lot of 4K internal. You have to go that. If you're using an external monitor on the camera, you need to change the down convert type on the output to letterbox instead of squeeze or edge crop. Audio set, we're plugging the shotgun mic into the back of the camera. So if you look at the camera here, the audio, the shotgun mic goes into the back of the camera. This is input one, and if you look just to the left, just to the right of where it says input one, there's a switch right here that says line mic and mic plus 48. You want that switched all the way over to the right on mic plus 48. That's providing power to the microphone. The microphone won't work without power to it. Now you have an XLR connector back here, and you have an XLR connector underneath here, which is input 2, and you also have that line mic and mic plus 48 switch here. So what we're doing is we're basically plugging the shotgun mic into channel 1 input, or input 1, not channel 1, input 1, and then we're setting it up so both channel 1 and channel 2 are reading that shotgun mic. So we're feeding that shotgun mic to both channels. And then you want your audio limiter on, which is if you have a loud noise, like a gunshot or a door slam or car backfiring, it won't overmodulate and keep it from overmodulating, but it doesn't hurt your overall audio. And then in display set, this is really the big ones. This is what you got to really set up for this class. You got to have your histogram on with zebra point. You got to have your zebra 1 set for 70 and your zebra 2 set for 90. This is one of the things that was different between the Mark 1 and the Mark 2. We'll talk about later why we have those both set for each of those. You want your peaking on. Peaking is a fine line, fine detail, fine edge enhancing filter that helps you focus. You want your marker on. Center marker is a personal preference, but you want your guide frame on. This is what Sony calls the rule of thirds grid. Your focus magnify ratio, you want that at 8x only. It can be 4x and 8x, or 4x only and 8x. We want that at 8x. You want your zoom display from bar to number, and you want your focus display from meters to feet. And you want to turn your gamma display, make sure that's off. And then your viewfinder LCD panel, you want to make sure that's on LCD panel only. If you have that on auto, every time you stick your eye in front of the rear viewfinder, the LCD goes off. And that's cool if you're using it that way, but it gets to be a pain in the butt. Anytime you put your hand in front of it, anytime you put your body in front of it, anytime you pass by anything by it, shuts off your LCD. So that becomes a real pain in the butt. The better way to do that is on the top of the LCD, there's an on-off switch. And if you turn that off, it automatically turns the rear viewfinder on. On the back corner of the rear viewfinder right here, there's a little dial. It's called a diopter. You can dial that in for your eyesight. So you just look in your viewfinder and dial that in until the numbers and stuff look in focus to you. Any questions? That document is located, Robbie, that document is located in about 15 different places in week 1. With the Sony mic, should have the switch on M or L. It's M or V, not L. You want it on V for voice. M is for music, V is for voice. Yeah. Sorry, where this this document's located, again, if you look in the FS5 camera assignment, it's there. If you look at the email I sent out to you last Thursday, it's there. If you look at it, I mean, it's everywhere. So it's it's like 5 different places in week 1. You'll see it populated throughout. Time code, TCUB stands for time code user bit. You want to make sure that you have your time code set to free run first, and then you want to go back up and set your time code preset for time of day. And we're just using that for time of day. So if you're out recording and you get back to the post and you go, where was that good take at? Well, we shot at about 2 o'clock. You can go to 2 o'clock on your time code and you can see that footage. You're shooting such small amounts, it doesn't really matter in this class. And then this is where your networking stuff is set up. And again, you can set up to use your remote control. There's a little remote that comes with the camera. You can use your phone as a monitor or to control your camera or your iPad. This is where you do that, but again, we don't get into that. The page numbers here refer to your camera manual. And then a system, you're gonna go in and we're gonna remap assign buttons, 3 assign buttons. You got 6 assign buttons on the camera. Here's one right here on the left side of the camera, and it says S and Q right there. We're remapping that to zebra. Here's 2, which says picture profile. We're remapping that to peaking. Here's 3, which is status, and that just shows you a status menu. If you push this button, there's 7 pages of menus in there. If you look right below the timecode button number up here in the corner, when you push status, you will see a little number up here that says 1 of 7. If you have a battery plugged in, 1 of 6 if you have it plugged into the AC display. And again, you can use the set select dial here to navigate through the different menus. And you can see it shows you how much battery time you have left. It shows you how much disk space you've used, shows you how you have the camera set up, how you have your ND filters and your ISO set up. These are all the assigned buttons. This is how you have the output set up. And this is your audio meters, tells you how you have your audio. So you're setting your audio, you would go to menu number 1 in the status button here, and you can set up your audio to bigger LED meters. Assign button number 4 is on the top of the handle over here. It's the zoom magnifier. And then assign button number 5 is on the back of the right handle here, which is called the direct menu, and we'll get into that. That you'd use that primarily if you're only shooting handheld, which you're not doing in this class, but we'll talk about that a little bit later on. And then assign button number 6, which is really hard to find. It's on the inside of your handle. Kind of hard to see, but if you put your hand through the handle and wrap your fingers around the edge of it, it's right here where your index finger is on the inside. It's right there. Kind of hard to see, but that my finger is actually on the button right there. And all that does is turn on and off the rule of thirds grid in here, which we have mapped to that. You can see it going on and off. So those are the assign buttons, and that's what you're doing here. You're just remapping those out to different things. And then you want your daylight savings time turned on. I turn my front record lamp off, which is right underneath where the handle connects to the front of the camera, because sometimes I don't want people to know I'm recording them. Not that I'm trying to be sneaky, but if I'm shooting talent, for example, I may record the rehearsal without them knowing me, because I may get a better performance out of them if they don't feel like they're being recorded. And then also in the system, under system, you have media format. This is where you format your media card. And again, you got to read that assignment overview that we're talking about next on how to format your cards. I just had a student last week, as a matter of fact, who called me and said, my card became corrupted. And I said, well, did you format the card after you used it every time? She was like, no, I didn't. I was like, we talked about this, so she had to buy a new card and all the footage was lost. So don't do that. There is also a thing in here called repair image database file. So if you're shooting and your battery runs out on your camera, and sorry, where's this document located? Robbie, you're still asking, you got it? So let me just show you this, Robbie. If you go into the here, this is the FS5 camera package, the assignment. If you go down here, it says Sony MS5 menu setup PDF. There's also a video in here too, I think. Here's the walkthrough that just walks you through the camera. Here's a technical guide, how to set exposure. There's a cheat sheet that will go through the video, instruction manual, tripod screws, light kit. I'll send you the video as well. Okay, so if we go back to this, we're almost through with this. There's a thing here called repair image database. So if you're shooting and your battery goes out on your camera and you plug it into your AC power supply or put another battery and turn it back on, you will see a thing that says image database error. Would you like to repair? You say yes, because it's not going to erase anything. It's just going to go in and restructure the database file on the card. And so that's it. Also, if you are trying to read the card in your computer and it's not reading for some reason, put it back in the camera, go back to this menu portion and go through and repair the image database and then take it out. week one assignment. You also have a video you made. Yeah, that's the week one assignment. That's where it's at. So repair image database is a good way to know that. If your camera is really just acting totally wonky and not doing anything, you can hit initialize, and that will set it all back to the factory preset, the way the camera came. But then you'll have to go back through all of this and do it. If you start having problems with the camera for some strange reason, like the lens is zooming in and out on its own, or you're not being able to use the right handle at all. The right handle is usually because of the cable not being plugged in all the way. But also we found that a lot of the problems are because of the top two screws right here on the handle. Make sure those screws are tight. If you're having problems with the camera, that would be the first thing I check, because we found that for some strange reason, and you won't find that anywhere online, or if you talk to Sony, they won't tell you that, but we found that 99% of the time that fixes most of the problems. So that's it. So that's the FS5 menu setup guide. You have to go through that. Really important that you do that. Here's a infographic that I made that shows you where all the stuff is in the viewfinder. So you need to get to know where all these things are and what they are. It's really important that you do that. Especially the ND filter, your aperture, your iris, shutter speed, and your ISO, and then your white balance. This is your audio meters. This is the histogram. This is the zebra point, the yellow line in here. This is your zebra. This will have a 1 or a 2 next to it, depending on where you have that button. Peaking, this tells you that you're peaking on. This tells you that you have your steady shot off. This is your picture profile 2. This is your manual focus icon telling you you're in manual focus. The focus number, which only appears in the viewfinder after you adjust your front focus ring, and only stays up for 3 seconds. So you got to know what all that is. You also need to make sure that your camera's set up for XAVC 1080 24p 50. You don't have to have the proxy mode on, by the way. And then this tells you your Z number, your focal length right here, and this tells you how much battery. And this again tells you this is your time code up here that we set for time of day. There are walkthrough videos here. There's the 3 walk. Again, these are for the original camera, but all the buttons and switches and knobs are the same. Just you can't set up any menu settings with these videos. They're wrong. Here's a technical guide that I made. This is my version of the technical manual, of the camera. It walks you through the whole first part of this. I want you to kind of get a feel for where this camera falls within the rank of all the big cameras. If you look at the prices on these, so like the Red 8K Monstrous, $85,000 for the camera brain only. That's without a lens, without batteries, $85,000. The Panavision DXL2, which is the high end of that, it's based on a Red camera. You can't even buy it. It's only a rental. The Aries 65 is $150,000 for the body. The Sony Vintage, which is Sony's new large frame. These are all large frame cameras. I said full frame, but they are large frame cameras now. $42,000. And then the mid-range cameras, Sony just came out with the FS9 as well. These are between $10,000 and $15,000. The Canon C700, again, $28,000 for the body only. Arri Alexa, $20,000 to $40,000. The Panavision VariCam starts at $30,000, and then you go into here. This is like $5,600. The Panasonic Evil 1 is $6,500. The Blackmagic Ursa Mini Pro is $6,000. The 4K, the 6K Pocket one is $2,500, and then the Canon C300 is $10,000. So this will compete with these other cameras, especially if you have an external recorder, but I just want you to see kind of where it falls. And then I've got more resources in here. And then this is all technical stuff about the camera. And so if you don't need to know this, we go through the 3 different record formats on the camera. We talk about MPEG RAW, which is a legacy kind of format that you don't know. I talk about the frame rates, the 3 different frame rates that we record audio to in the United States, 24, 30, and 60. You would use 60 if you see slow-mo like a basketball replay or a football replay. It's shot at 60 frames a second unless they're shooting super slow-mo, because when you speed it down, it's not as blurry. And then we have S&Q, off-speed frame rates, S&Q and super slow-mo on this camera. Focal lengths, we talk about focal lengths. What a focal length is, it's just the zoomed in, zoomed out. There are 2 types of lenses. There are zoom lenses, which is what you've got here, a zoom lens, which means the variable focal length. You can zoom in to 105 millimeters, or you can zoom out to 18 millimeters. That's a variable focal length. And then there are prime lenses. Prime lenses are fixed focal length. So you'd have like a 24 millimeter lens, and that's all it would do. And then you'd have to move the camera in and out. You couldn't zoom in and out. Or you'd have a 35. And there are standard focal lengths: 18, 24, 35, 50, 70, 75, 85, and then above 100. Those are pretty much the standard focal lengths. And in week 3, we'll talk about why those are the focal lengths that are used based on how we see things with our human eye. There are 2 ways to understand focal length, and a focal length means whether or not it's zoomed in or zoomed out. Sony has this proprietary focal length system that is horrible, horrible, horrible. Can't say that enough. We've actually told Sony that if they don't get rid of it on their next camera, we won't be using Sony cameras anymore. And we are the largest buyer of Sony cameras in the world. So it's that serious about it. It means absolutely nothing. So the entire rest of the world talks about focal length in terms of millimeters. So I've developed a chart that we're going to be using in this class that will convert those millimeters, Z numbers, to millimeters that you have to use for every shot you do. So you need to start learning what the relationship is. Here's a really basic chart, but in the assignments, I have a more expanded chart here. So we talk about focal length and depth of field, how it affects focal length affects depth of field, and we talk about focus and what focus is. You got to learn how to focus this camera, and the way you focus, it's really simple. You zoom in all the way to Z99, all the way in on the lens on your focal length, on whatever the focal point is of the shot, and you adjust your front focus ring here until the image looks like it's in focus. So this is your front focus ring right here. There are a couple, rings on this. Front one is focus, the back one is zoom, is a manual zoom. So you adjust this, and this is what's called an infinity focus ring. It just turns and turns and turns. In reality, the entire focal length range on this camera is only about that far. That's it. If you're turning it more than that, you're going way beyond the range. It's only about an inch or 2. That's it. But it's called an infinity focus. So you zoom all the way in on the object, your focal point, adjust the front focus ring until it's in focus. And in the viewfinder, in the lower left-hand corner of the viewfinder, kind of hard to see, but I'll put this in here so you can see it. As you'll see it, a pop-up will look right here in between your picture profile and your manual focus icon. Watch what happens when I adjust. See that number that just popped up there? And it goes from infinity to 1.5 feet, depending on where I have my focus, my focal length set. So see, there's the infinity symbol at 450 feet. Here's 1.5 feet, and you can see that's what it is. Now, if I have my peaking turned on, which I do, if I focus on anything that has fine lines or fine detail in it, you'll see some of that turn bright red that has fine details. And you can see that kind of on the iris right down there. So if you look in the camera right here, this little thing right there has a little bit of red on it, and that's peaking. That's telling me that I'm in focus on that. So that's how you focus. You zoom in all the way. And we go through that in here, and we talk about peaking, and we talk about here's the peaking on this and how it works. Anything that's bright red is in focus, but it has to have fine lines and fine details. So you don't always use that, only when it's applicable. That's it. And then the other thing you can use is Focus Mag. And Focus Mag is this assigned button number 4 on the top of the right handle right here. And when you hit this, it puts a gray box in your viewfinder, and it says Focus Magnifier up here. And inside that gray box is a little red box. So that gray box represents your entire viewfinder. So if you're trying to focus on something, it's where it's at in the viewfinder. So you can move that red box by using this multifunction toggle switch on the back of the right handle here. This little black multifunction toggle switch right there. You can go up and down, left and right, and you can put that right on the focal point of your shot, what you're trying to focus on. And if you zoom in all the way to Z99 and then put that red box on what it is, that the gray represents the entire viewfinder. The red box represents an 8x digital zoomed in area of that viewfinder. So you're zoomed in at Z99, you put that red box on what you're trying to focus on, and then you adjust your front focus ring. Now it's going to be really touchy because you're zoomed in all the way at Z99 and you're on an 8x digital zoom until it looks like it's in focus. And then you hit the assign button number 4 button to get you out of Focus Mag and zoom back out and set up your shot, and you're in focus. Now this camera is what's called the lens is what's called a parfocal lens, meaning that if you zoom in all the way, adjust your focus and zoom out, it will hold that focus. Now that's important to know because some lenses are called varifocal lenses, and those are like DSLR lenses, like Canon or Nikon or Sony DSLR lenses. Those won't do that. If you zoom in and set your focus and zoom back out, you're out of focus. So, but this camera is a parafocal lens and it will hold that. So there is also a minimum variable focus distance on the camera. If you look on the upper right side of your camera, hard for you to see on mine because I got it blocked by what's called a cheese plate, but right up here in front of the camera, on the very right top corner of the camera, right next to where it says Exmore, you'll see a little silver spigot. That little silver spigot is a tape measure hook that if you're working on a studio with a dual follow focus and an AC, he would put the tape measure on that and run it out to the talent's eye and measure the distance and then set it, mark it on the follow focus, and then he'd be able to follow focus on it. It's a little bit of dog and pony show for this camera. You really wouldn't be using it on this camera. But right below that little silver spigot is a little circle with a line through it. Right here, you can see it. And that is called the focal plane symbol. That's where it's at right there. And that focal plane symbol is where the focus is measured from. So there's a variable minimum focus distance on this camera. From Z00 to Z82, it's 1.5 feet. You have to be 1.5 feet away from the object you're trying to focus on to actually be able to focus. If you're closer, you can't focus on that. But as you get beyond Z82, Z83, it's 1.6 feet. Z84 is 1.7 feet. Z85 is 1.8 feet. By the time you hit Z91, you're up to 3.1 feet, and it stays there from Z91 to Z99. You got to be 3.1 feet away from that little circle with the line through it to actually be able to focus on that. Now, most of you will have issues if you get too closer than that, but if you understand that, then you can actually use that. You can put objects that you want out of focus closer than that, and objects that you want in focus a little bit farther away from that, and that way you can automatically get the foreground out of focus. So it's a good way to use that. It's called a minimum variable focus distance. Exposure and aperture. So this is another thing that people who don't know much about photography kind of lose it about. Let me just talk about this. Exposure is really all about 5 different things. The light source itself, whether it be an artificial light source or a natural light source like the sun, how bright that is, how big it is, or how close it is to the camera, and then the reflectivity of an object. So if I shot this, not a whole lot of reflectivity on it. If I shot this, a lot of reflectivity on it. So that's a big kind of cause. And then as the light bounces off the object and goes into the lens, it goes through an iris. And an iris is the mechanical device that opens and closes. See those little blades on there that are open and closes? That's called the iris. That's the mechanical device that opens and closes. The size of the hole that the iris makes is called the aperture. And then as the light goes through the aperture determines how much light goes in, and then it goes to a shutter. And the shutter is right behind that, and that determines how much time the light that's coming through the aperture has to hit the sensor, and then behind that is the sensor. So you got sensor, shutter speed, aperture, iris, reflectivity of the object, and the sun. That all controls it. Now, when we look at this, it's a little bit backwards. The thing you have to remember is that a small aperture, this creates a deep depth of field, this size aperture. This creates a shallow depth of field. It's backwards. So what this is a large f-stop number. This is a f22 on this camera. This is f4 on this lens. So it's backwards. But what you got to realize, and it affects depth of field. So a small aperture is a shallow depth of field. A large aperture is a small aperture is a deep depth of field. A large aperture is a shallow depth of field. So if you think about it this way, a large number is a large depth of field. A small number, f4, is a small depth of field. So it's easier to remember that way because the f-stop number and the size of the hole are backwards. So a lot of people get confused about that. The sensitivity of the sensor is called ISO on the camera. There is actually no such thing as ISO on video. It's actually called gain, but we use ISO as a way to help people understand how to do that. ISO has nothing to do with film or video. It's actually just a standard of measurement. Anybody know what ISO stands for by any chance? Most people think it stands for International Standards Organization. It actually stands for International Organization of Standardization. And it's just a standard of measurement. It's probably what best known for the restaurant and automotive industry, ISO 2000, ISO 4000. It was just used in the early days of film to determine the sensitivity of the emulsion of film. In video, there is no such thing. So it's really gain, how much gain or noise you have in the image. But we use ISO and gain intermittently. And if you look on the left side of your camera, there's actually a button called the ISO gain button. And then in your menu under camera paint, the very first thing is ISO gain select. So you can select gain if you want to. Was a format to something. Nope, it's just International Organization of Standardization. That's it. So you'll hear me talk about another way. We talk about video level in terms of something called IRE. It's 0 IRE to 100 IRE. That's a video signal. IRE is another one of those standards of measurement. It just stands for International Radio Engineers. Has nothing to do with film or video. It's just a standard of measurement. So again, it's you got to know what each of these things are: iris, aperture, and overall exposure. Now the problem becomes a lot of people get confused about this because a lot of people say iris up or raise your exposure or open up your aperture. So you hear a lot of people talk about all these three things kind of intermixed, and they all mean the same thing: make your image brighter. So, but you have to know what each individual thing is. Again, the mechanical device that opens and closes is called the iris. The size of the hole that it makes is called the aperture, and then overall exposure, and it gets a little bit deeper than that. So exposure is measured in something called f-stops. Um, and so f-stop is a measurement of overall exposure. Increasing the exposure by one f-stop doubles the exposure, and decreasing the exposure by one f-stop halves the exposure. That's spelled wrong. F-stops are generally measured in third, a half, and full stops. In this class, we want you to think about f-stops and full stops. So there are four things that affect exposure on this camera. Your aperture, your f-stop number, your shutter speed, your ISO, the sensitivity of the sensor, and neutral density filters, ND filters. All four of those things will affect your exposure. In still photography, there's something called the exposure triangle, which is ISO, shutter speed, and aperture. You can adjust any of those three things together to get the overall exposure that you want. However, in video, it's different. It's really more of a straight line. The shutter speed is based on you know, the natural motion blur we see with our eye. And this is something really cool that most of you don't know. Everybody knows who's John. Everybody knows who John Cena is, the wrestler and actor now. John's a pretty cool guy. I've met him several times. Okay, and his signature move is what? You can't see me now. So what I want you to do is do a John Cena, we call it. Take your hand, put it about a foot in front of your face, and then go back and forth like this really fast. And look at your fingers. What do you see? So let me open this up so I can hear you. So what do you guys see? It blurs. So most of you have probably never realized before that you actually, I get the bracket. Uh, Most of you guys have never probably realized that you've never seen motion blur with your eye, but that's the natural motion blur that we see with our eye. So in still photography, it's just a still image. You don't have to worry about that. But in video, what we're trying to do when we shoot is we're trying to emulate that natural motion blur that we see with our eye. And so over the last 100 years of filmmaking, since filmmaking has been around, they've determined that it's something called the 180-degree rule. So basically, you don't really even need to know that. All you need to know is that we found out that if you double your frame rate that you're recording, that gives you that natural motion blur. So again, there are three frame rates: 24, 30, and 60 that we record audio with video in North America. In this class, we're recording 24. So it's twice 24 is what? 48. So 1/48th of a second is where you would set your shutter speed to get the natural motion blur at 24 frames a second that we see with our eye. So that's how you determine your shutter speed. And so that gets taken out of the exposure triangle altogether. And then ISO, because we have a bigger camera with a bigger sensor, this camera doesn't handle noise or cranking up the ISO very well. I have a Sony A6500 and the A7S II and the A7R2 and the A7. I just got the new A7R4 camera. Their base ISO, and we'll talk about base ISO in here in a second. The base ISO is like 100 on that. I shoot at ISO 8000 all the time, and those cameras don't even think about it. The base ISO on picture profile of this camera is 640. And if you go up to more than 2500 ISO on this camera, the image falls apart. It's just unusable. So the philosophy for video is you always want to try to shoot at the base ISO as much as possible. And because every time you deviate from that base ISO up or down, you deteriorate the image quality. So it's a trade-off. How much are you willing to deteriorate the image quality instead of just lighting? So in this class, you're going to keep your ISO at 640 and you're going to keep your shutter speed at 48, except for week 2 when we shoot a fast and slow shutter speed, then it will change. And so those two things get taken out of the exposure triangle altogether. So what you end up with is your aperture or your f-stop and your ND filters. Now, in still cameras, you can screw in ND filters, but this one has a electronic ND filter built into it. And there are two different types of ND filter on this. There's preset, which is 3 numbers, and there's variable, which goes just like exposure, a third, half, and full stops from 2 stops all the way up to 7 stops. Again, if you're in variable, there's no variable in this class. We're going to keep it in preset ND. And those there are 3 numbers: a quarter ND, a 16th ND, and a 64th ND. This is your ND filter right here on the left side of the camera. Yours is mine's silver, yours is black. So it says clear 1, 2, and 3. If you have it on clear and you look at your viewfinder in the corner down here, in the very left corner down here, you will see nothing. But if you dial this to 1, now you will see it says a quarter ND down here. If you dial it to 2, you will see it says a 16th ND down here. And if you dial it to 3, you will see it say a 64th ND. That's clear. So this is clear. And just look, and let me just do this real fast. Let's see here. That's right. So this is clear. This is 1, this is 2, and this is 3. You saw how dark it got? So ND, you got to think of ND filter, neutral density filter, as sunglasses for your camera. If it's too bright and you're at f22, your iris all the way down, and you're letting as little light in as possible, then you need to dial in ND filters on the camera. That's how you take it down. Or if you're trying to get a shallow depth of field and you want to shoot at f4 instead of like f16 or f22, which will give you a deep depth of field, and you're inside and you got it lit, or you're outside and you got it lit, and you can't change the lighting, then you would dial in ND filter to bring that down to a smaller aperture or larger aperture to give you a shallower depth of field. So that's it. Now, I just want to show you an easy way to remember full stops. Again, think about everything as full stops. Just stop thinking about a third and half stops. That will just confuse you. That will come. Again, that's why we have ND filters, only 3 ND filters. So look at it this way. So lenses, the speed of a lens is determined by how low the f-stop number would go. Really, 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 really fast lenses are f1. And then it goes 1.4, and then 2, and then 2.8, and then 4, and then 5.6, then 8, then 11, 16, 22, 32, 64. You don't see 32 or 64 on video cameras because of something called refraction. If you look at the size of the hole, it's so small. And if you remember those old garden hoses that had a single, spigot on it, as you opened it up, you had a steady stream of water coming out. But as you close that down, you had a cone of water coming out. It turned into like a cone of water. Same thing happens with light. Light bends. So when it goes through a little hole like this, as it's coming through, as you have it opened up, the light's just coming straight through. But as you take it down too small, the light comes through there and then bends out like this, and it diffuses the light coming into the sensor, and you get a little bit softer image. So it's called refraction, and that's why we don't shoot beyond like f22 on this. And even in this camera, we try not to shoot at f/22. This is called a kit lens, by the way, or a factory lens, and they're manufactured to sell cameras with. It's easier to sell a camera with a lens attached to it than without a lens. But they're not horrible lenses, but they're not the same as a $30,000 cinema lens in terms of quality. So they have some issues, and those issues appear primarily on the extreme ends of the lens. So in this class, we're going to ask you not to shoot at the extreme ends of the lens. Um, so no f/22 or no f/4. Those are the extreme ends of aperture on this. This lens is a 18 to 105 millimeter lens that goes from f/4 to f/22. Those are the minimum and maximum apertures on the lens. So don't shoot at f/4, don't shoot at f/22. Shoot at f/4.5 and f/21. And every assignment we give you will have specific apertures that you need to set it at within a range, and we'll never have you shoot at f/4 or f/21. Same thing with focal length. Don't shoot at Z99 because it's a little soft on the long end, or don't shoot at Z00 because it's a little soft on the wide end. Shoot at Z05 or Z95 as your ends. So that will help you. So no shooting at extreme ends of the lens. So again, an easy way to remember these numbers here, the full stops, and there's 5 full stops. You start at f/4. So if you remember f/4 and f/5/6, just remember those 2 numbers. f/4, f/5/6, double 4, 8, double 5/6, 11, double 8, 16, double 11, 22. Every other number doubles. An easy way to remember the full stops. And after a month of playing around with just full stops, then you will be able to start looking at third stops and half stops. Now, everything that we talk about will be in full stops, like your shutter speed. If I go from 148 to 196, I've doubled my shutter speed and I've taken away a stop of light. If I go from 148 to 124th, I've halved my shutter speed and I've gained a stop of light. So you'll see that in week 2 when we talk about shutter speed, how shutter speed affects 2 things: motion blur, whether or not the image is going to be frozen or blurred, and the amount of light you need to shoot. The smaller the shutter speed, the less light you need. The higher the shutter speed, the more light you need. With ND filter, we're talking about 2 stops, 4 stops, and 6 stops. A quarter ND, ND1 on this is a quarter ND, 2 stops of light it takes away. A 16th ND, ND2 is 4 stops of light. ND3, a 64th ND is 6 stops of light. In terms of ISO, every time you bump up your ISO, and if you look on the side of the camera here, there's a little switch here that says low, medium, and high, L, M, and H. So we have low set for the base ISO of the picture profile, which is 640. Medium is 1250. So if you double 640, it's 1280. The camera doesn't do 1280, it only does 1240. So 1250 is almost to stop more light, and then 2500 is twice 1250, so that's 2 stops of light. So you go from base ISO to 1 stop to 2 stops of light, basically. So again, think about everything in terms of full stops. There's a whole thing called the math of cinematography that I'm working on right now. That's it. Exposure, we talked about all that. ND filters, how to use ND filters, the direct menu. Again, the direct menu is just a way to control everything if you're hand holding. So if you hit assign button number 5 and look at it, it will put a bunch of white lines underneath your 4 major, your ISO, your shutter speed, your ND filter, aperture, ISO, shutter speed, and white balance. We'll have a little white lines under them. One of those lines will be orange. And again, you can use that multifunction toggle switch to move that orange switch back and forth, left and right. And then if you click in on whatever the orange line is under, you can control that with your shutter speed, your multifunction toggle switch. So you can control that just with your thumb. So that's if you're handheld shooting and you got the camera up like this, you don't have to reach over to the left side of the camera to adjust all that. You can adjust it there. But in this class, we're not really using that a whole lot because we're on sticks. So anytime you hit assign button number 5, again, those go away. So, but you should get to know how to use them. You just got to be careful because wherever, like ISO, wherever, if you're on low here on the switch on the side, and you go into direct menu and you change that from 640 to 1200, that now becomes the de facto standard for low on this 1200. So you'd have to go back and change that. Also, if you're in white balance, you'll also see some strange things that you can't see before, like a little sun or a little light bulb. Those are consumer level white balances, meaning outdoors and indoors. And then you'll also see something called ATW, auto trace white balance. That's just a simple way of saying that you're an auto white balance. So you want to stay away from that. So let's talk about zebra stripes. So zebra stripes are a electronic overlay that appears in the camera. And again, remember we set zebra 1 for 70 in our menu and zebra 2 for 90. So it's just telling you at a specific level where you will see zebra stripes. And also it's tied into the yellow line in the histogram called the zebra point. So if you have a zebra 1 up, that will move over. And I can show you this. It's the sign button number 1 right here. So if I push my assign button number 1 button and you look at this, let's see if I can get it really close to this. If I push my assign button number 1, look at my little zebra right here. You will see it change from a 1 to a 2. Oh, I just turned peaking off. Um, and look at the yellow line in the histogram. You see it's at 70%, 90%, and off. So it goes, it's a 3-button push. 70 is zebra 1, 90 is zebra 2, and the third push is off. It goes off. You want that set on zebra 2 for most of these. And in week 3, we'll go use zebra 1 for faces. And so the reason we're using zebra 1 for the face and the zebra 2 for whites is because at zebra 1 has an aperture on it. And if you noticed in the menu, it said 10% aperture. It will go from 2% all the way up to 20%. We have it set for 10%. And the reason we have zebra 1 set at 70 is because Caucasian skin tone is set for 70 IRE. So if you were shooting a face and you saw a little bit of zebra stripes on the face, let's see if I have that in here, I don't. You would like see the big spectral highlight right here on my skin, on my forehead. If you had your zebra 1 set at 70 and you saw a bunch of zebra stripes right there and on my nose right there, you would know that my face was exposed properly. Now, the reason we use zebra 1 is because of that 10% aperture. So it will, if you have it set for 70, it will show you zebra stripes from 65 to 75. And that's important because 65 is darker skin tones, 70 is Caucasian skin tones, and 75 is paisley white skin tones. So it covers the whole skin tone gamut for zebra 1 because we have that 10% aperture. Zebra 2 doesn't have a 10% aperture. It's just anytime you have it, whatever number you have that set at, when you see zebras, that's what the number is. So we have that set for 90. And again, we have that set for 90, and you'll see there's a whole histogram video did. On the left side of the histogram over here, that's pure black, 0. On the right side over here, that's pure white, 100. At 0 and 100, you have no detail in your blacks or your whites. You start losing detail at about 10 IRE on your blacks, and you start losing detail in your whites about 90 IRE. So that's why we have our zebra 2 set for 90. So when you see anything in your histogram beyond the right side of this yellow line right here on zebra 2, you know that you're blowing it out or overexposing it. Likewise, you would see zebra stripes all over it on this. So easy way to tell whether or not you're there. Let me just see if I can pull this up real fast so I can show you. Here we go. I didn't mean to get this far into the camera, but since we're here, here's all the exposure stuff that we go through. Here's zebra stripes. So again, you would see zebra stripes on the cheeks and the things for zebra 1 and zebra 2. And I'll include this PowerPoint presentation. And you can see here, you can see a little bit of zebra on the white. This is set for 70, this is set for 90. So see how the white in here is right, this white information in your histogram is called pixel density. And that represents, the height represents how many pixels are in each of these 5 different zones of the histogram: blacks, shadows, midtones, highlights, and whites. Again, you don't have a whole lot of detail in your blacks or a lot of detail in your whites. It's really in the middle. So you can see this, and you can see a lot of detail. That's all your blacks here. This is the gorilla's face, and then the white right here is this little white right here. And you can see it's right close to the left side of the yellow line, but nothing's on the right side. You don't want anything on the right side of that yellow line in standard gamma, picture profiles 1 through 6, picture profile 10. That's how you use zebra. This is zebra 1, and you can see you got zebra stripes all over the place now, and you're beyond that. Again, that would just be used for flesh tones on this. And again, you can see it here. See the little spectral highlights? See the little spectral highlights on the globe, and there's a little bit of zebra stripes on the elephant's arm and stuff like that. That's telling you that you're exposed properly. This is telling you that you're way overexposed on zebra 2. So you don't want to see a lot of zebra stripes. So that's an easy way to tell whether or not you're exposed or underexposed. You got to learn how to use that. And then, of course, we're going to talk about white balance. And so white balance on this camera this is the one thing that's going to throw a lot of you off. And so let's just talk about that for a second. Well, before I do that, let me talk about ISO. What I didn't talk about ISO was something called the base or native ISO. And again, the base or native ISO is where the camera is set up to operate its optical optimum performance. That's where it's set up. It's going to get the least amount of noise or gain in the camera. It's going to reproduce color the best, reproduce contrast the best, and give you the most dynamic range. Now, dynamic range is something that you need to get to know a lot about. Most of you don't know. It's also talked about in terms of contrast range. It basically means what's the difference that the camera can see between the brightest part of the image and the darkest part of the image. Now, the problem becomes it's very, very limited on this camera. When you're shooting an XAVC picture profile 2, it's only like 7 stops. When Sony first came out, they said it was 10 stops, but then I did tests and found it was more like 7 stops. And then I called Sony and said, "You're wrong," and they were like, "Yeah." Now they're saying 7 stops. You can see 21 to 24 stops with your eye, depending on your health and your eye health and your age. But the camera can only see 7 stops. So that means you can't put the camera in high contrast shooting situations that are beyond 7 stops of dynamic range. So anytime you're shooting a shot, you need to know, number one, what your dynamic range of the camera is. It changes on this camera. Most cameras only have one base ISO, but on this camera there are multiple base ISOs, and that determines what your dynamic range is. When you're shooting in standard gamma on this camera in picture profile 2, it's 7. When you go to picture profile 1 or 5 or 6, it bumps up to about 8 or 9 stops, and then when you're shooting raw, which are picture profile 7, 8, 9, it bumps up to 14 stops. So you can double the amount of dynamic range on this camera if you shoot raw. That's why everybody likes to shoot raw. Sony's version of raw is called S-Log. But when you're shooting raw, you got to color correct all your footage before you can use it. When you're shooting the standard gamma, it's pretty much what you shoot is what you get. You can still color correct it, but you can also air it the way it is. So that's why we're shooting standard gamma, because you don't know how to color correct yet. So the general rule and philosophy you should adapt is always try to shoot at the base or native ISO whenever possible. Anytime you change your base or native ISO, you're deteriorating the image quality. And in this class, there's no reason to do that. If you need more light, you just add more light, or if you're outside, you wait for better light. So that's what it's all about. We go through the ND filter here, and here's the difference between variable and preset. So 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 14, 21 different stops that you need to memorize. If you can memorize all these, you can use variable, but until you got those memorized, use preset, which is only quarter ND, a 16th ND, and a 64th. So that way you need to know how many stops of light you're taking away from your camera. Now, the variable ND, this is the very first camera to ever have variable electronic ND filter. The very first camera to ever have auto electronic variable ND filters. Both of those things are very valuable things to use down the road, so you need to really get to know how to use those properly. So let's talk about the white balance for a second. So anybody have any questions before we go? And how are we doing on time? I know I'm struggling here, 6:17. Man. Let me cruise through this because it's important for you to understand how to white balance this camera. There are actually 4 numbers that you need to commit to memory now, because we are now using the new lights. And so I can walk you through this, but I want to show you which is your LED light. Both knobs turn to the right. So in the back of your LED lights, there are 2 knobs, yellow and white. And so those determine your color temperature and the output of your light. When you have both knobs turned all the way to the right, you're at 4,400 degrees Kelvin. When you have the top knob turned to the left, bottom knob turned to the right, you're at 5,600 degrees Kelvin, but you're only using half the bulbs in the light. And when you have the top knob turned to the right and the bottom knob turned to the left, you're at 3,200 degrees Kelvin. So this LED is considered to be a bicolor LED light. It goes from 32 to 56. When you're at 44 with both knobs turned to the right, you're getting 280 watts of light out of this. When you're at either of the other ends, you're only getting 140 watts. So it cuts the output in half. So let's talk about why we white balance. So when you from birth on, your eye, through something called color constancy or something called color adaptivity, is auto white balancing for you. So if you look at this inside, it's going to be white. If you look at it outside, it's still going to look white to you because your eye and your brain are working together to color constantly auto white balance for you. In video, we don't want that to happen. So what we do with this workflow that we're going to be using is we're retraining our eye to really look at subtle differences of white. Okay, so that's a really important thing to do. And this white balance workflow is going to throw a lot of you off until you get it down. So but you need to commit to memory these four numbers and the color temperatures that they represent as we go through this. So here's the color temperature scale. And so light is measured in something called Kelvin degrees, based on this guy named Sir Kelvin. That was his real name. But it's basically how they determined this. It was a zero scale, and they took a piece of black, it's called a black radiator. Think about it as a piece of black carbon, emitting no light whatsoever. And they heated that up. And as it heated up, it got warm, and then it got kind of orange, and it got white, and then eventually, if they heated it up enough, it would turn really blue. Now, a good analogy to this is a charcoal briquette. So it's black, but when you first heat it up, it starts getting red, and then as you heat it up, it gets really wet red, and it gets really, really hot. It gets white. But if you were able to heat that up even more, eventually that white would turn blue, and that's color temperature. So the lower the color temperature, the warmer the light. The higher the color temperature, the bluer the light. Now in video, you see color temperature between about 2,500 degrees Kelvin and 8,500 degrees Kelvin. If you're beyond those limits, you're doing something drastically wrong. So again, what happens is your eye is automatically white balancing for you, called color adaptivity. And it's based on a bunch of different things like memory and stuff that's going on in your cerebral cortex and the color cortex of your brain. It's automatically computing and saying, hey, we know that's supposed to look white. We're going to make it look white to you. But in video, the video camera is just a dumb box with a hole in it. So it doesn't know what white is. So you got to tell it what white is. And we do that by shooting a white or gray target. Now you got a white card uh, in your thing that looks like this. It's got a little string on it, says Porter Brace on the back. And so what I want you to do is I want you to take this white card and I want you to tape a piece of white printer paper on the back of it. Just tape it on there so it's the same size. So what you end up with is two white targets. These are called targets. So this one is a non-reflect. It's very reflective. You got to be careful, but it's a non-tinted white. Your printer paper still looks white, looks the same color to you, but in essence, what they do, the way they make printer paper brighter is they put blue ink in it. So it makes it look brighter. So these, even though if you white balance off of both of these, they're going to be really close to each other in terms of color temperature, but they're going to be slightly different. And that's what we want to see. So that's called, we're going to do that with A and B custom white balance on this camera. And there's a white balance switch on the camera called the white balance mode switch. It says AB preset on the left side of the camera. A and B are custom white balance. That's where you're letting the camera tell you what it thinks white balance should be by pointing it at something white or gray. This is white, this is gray. Camera sees white and gray exactly the same. This is called a white or gray target. Or you can get like a gray card. This is a $2.50 gray card for B&H. This happens to have the Ansel Adams zone photography thing on the back. Or you can buy, this is something I bought off of Amazon for $7. It's a white and gray target specifically for white balance. It folds down and goes into a little pouch and goes into your camera bag like that. But again, you don't have to buy that. All you have to do is tape a piece of white printer paper on the back of your white card for this workflow. That's what we want you to do. So there are two ways to white balance the camera. A and B, which are custom. You're letting the camera tell you what white balance should be by pointing at a white or gray target, in this case, two white targets, and we're doing two of them. So that gives us a range. And again, because you're white balancing under pretty much the same white target, they're just slightly different under the same main light source that you're shooting under, that number should be really close to each other. They can't be exactly the same sometimes, but more than likely they're going to be 100 or 200 degrees Kelvin different from each other. That's what you want to see. And so when you set up your shot, make sure you're exposed and focused and everything properly, and then you put your white card in after your shot is set up. So in this case, you're shooting like a cup in week one or object in the foreground. You just put your white card right in front of that cup, zoom into it, fill the frame, and then you expose for the white card. Now, an easy way to expose for white is put your zebra stripe to 2, and then iris up until you see zebra stripes on the white, and iris down until you see no zebra stripes. And then look at your histogram, and that pixel density in your histogram should be just on the left side of that yellow line, and that tells you that you're exposed properly. And then on the front of the camera, and so again, this is your switch, A, B, and preset right here for white balance. So you'd be an A on this. You put the white card in, zoom in, fill the frame at least by 85%, and then there's a button on the front of the camera right here, a white balance set button. Now, underneath your white balance information shows up underneath your audio meters right here. And if you look at your audio meters right here, you see there is no white balance information here. So there's a button on the side of the camera right here called white balance, WHTBAL. If you push that button, you will see an A or B or a Kelvin degree. There's A, there's B, and there's a Kelvin degree number there. I pushed the button again, sorry. So there's back. So under preset, you'll get a Kelvin degree number, and I got a white box around that. I just need to get rid of it. Hold on. I got rid of the white box. And then if I switch to A, it goes to A, and then that's my ISO. A and B. So you start with A, and you zoom in, fill the frame with the white card, make sure you're exposed properly. And if I hold this white card up here and shoot it, I would expose up on this. Let's see if I can get enough exposure out of this. And again, you'd put this under the main light source. See how that went all the way up, and you would bring that down just so you don't see zebra stripes on it, and it's right below the yellow line, right about there. And then you would white balance under that. On the white card. You'd hit the WB set button on the front of the camera, and the A would change to a Kelvin degree number for 3 seconds, and you would write that Kelvin degree number down in your camera report for A. And then you flip the card over to the printer paper side and do the same thing under B. And that would give you 2 numbers. Again, those numbers should be really close to each other. They shouldn't be more than 500 degrees. Now, the other way to white balance this camera is called preset, and that's where you put the white balance mode switch in preset, and that puts the Kelvin degree number underneath your audio meter. And then when you hit the WB set button here on the front of the camera right here, that puts a white box around the Kelvin degree number. And you can see that. Let me flip it down to preset and see the white box there. And then you can use your set select dial back here or your multifunction toggle switch on the back of your handle to move that number up and down. So you would take the white cards out, you would set up your shot, make sure you're exposed and focused properly the way you were originally without the white cards in there. And then you would dial that preset number in between what you got for A and B. Again, because we're using A and B to tell us where the camera thinks white balance should be. Normally you would just dial that in until it looks good, but you don't know enough about color temperature to understand that. So we're going to use A and B to get us in the ballpark. So you would just dial that number in between. So if I got 4,400 for A and 4,600 for B, I would dial my preset number into 45, right between those 2 numbers. And then with the shot set up and exposed properly and focused and all set up, then I would go up 500 degrees from 45 to 5,000, looking at my LCD, and then back down to 45, and then down 500 degrees to 4,000. So I would go between 4 and 5,000 within a 1,000 degree range there. And as I'm going up and down on my white balance, looking at the LCD, as I went above 4,500, it would get warmer looking. As I went down below 4,500, it would get bluer looking. And all you're trying to do is figure out where the white balance looks the most natural to you. You're retraining your eye to figure out what looks good to you in terms of white balance. And when you get to that point, you hit the set select button that gets rid of the white box, and you write that number down in your camera report for preset. So now you got an A and a B and a preset number. Again, all those numbers should be really close to each other, not more than 500 degrees different. And then the last step of the white balance workflow is once you have all 3 numbers written down in the camera report and the shot still set up and exposed properly, you simply switch back and forth between A, B, and preset, look at your LCD and figure out which one of those 3 settings look the best to you. And so what you're doing, and then you write that number down, you bold that number in the camera report. So if you thought preset looked the best to you, you would bold preset number in your camera report to let me know that's the one you chose to use. Really simple. A with your white card, B with the printer paper, both exposed properly. Take those out, set up your shot, make sure you're exposed and focused properly. Dial the preset number in between what you got for A and B, and then go up 500 degrees and down 500 degrees. Pick the spot that looks the best to you. uh, hit the set select button to get rid of the white box around the Kelvin degree number, write that number down, and then the last step is with the shot still set up and exposed properly, switch back and forth between A, B, and preset, figure out which one of those three numbers look the best to you, bold that one in the camera report. That's the white balance workflow. That's gonna kill a lot of you guys. Easily a quarter of the students will get assignments kicked back to them in week one because you don't do this. And again, we are showing you this in 9 different places in week one. I'm going through it here in the live class. There's a video, there's a step-by-step guide. There's an article called The Zen of White Balance in the FS5 technical guide. It goes through it. In the PowerPoint presentation, it goes through it. In the FS5 cheat sheet, it goes through it. There's 9 different places in week one that we show you how to do this. That should give you a clue that this is really important for you to understand how to do. And it's going to be difficult the first couple times you do it, but once you do it 2 or 3 times and get it down, then it's a breeze. You should be able to do, by week 3, you should be able to do this white balance workflow in about a minute. All 3, A, B, preset, in a minute. So it'll take you about a half an hour the first time you do it, but that will retrain your eye. So you're doing 2 things. As you're going up and down within that 1,000 degrees, you're retraining your eye to figure out what looks good to you in terms of white balance, because white balance is subjective. What I think looks good may be 200 or 300 degrees different from what you think looks good. Anything over 500 degrees, then that gets a little bit off of subjectivity. And then, so that's one part of it. And then when you have all 3 of your numbers down and you have the shot set up and you switch back and forth between A, B, and preset, that's retraining your eye to look at subtle differences of 100 degrees Kelvin at a time to figure out what looks the best to you. So that's what this is all about, to retrain your eye, to get your eye to stop just auto white balancing everything for you. And it's all gone through. There's all kinds of stuff in here. And then week 2, we'll go through shutter speed and all that. There's all kinds of stuff in here. Okay, so let's talk about the assignment real fast. So one of the things we haven't talked about here is the assignment, and I want to make sure that we go through this. So in week 2, or I'm sorry, in week 1, also under here, there's a whole thing about, before I forget to tell you this, there's a whole thing in here about media management. One of the things you need to pay attention to is this format here. You need to set up a file format on your desktop that looks like this. Original footage, still frames, behind the scenes, viewfinder still, assignment template, pages. You need to save both the pages and the PDF on these in case you have to go back and change it. This is what it should look like. You should have a file structure like this on your computer, either on your desktop or on your documents, and you need to be saving the stuff in here. So it's important that you understand how to do that. And then there's a whole thing about formatting your memory cards and SD card media management on this. Make sure that you go through and read that. Here's the class invite, the class archive video. There's the basics of lighting. If you look through this basic of lighting, it goes through some misconceptions about lighting. It talks to you about 3-point lighting, what each of those 3 lights do, your key light, fill light, backlight. Talks to you about a lighting workflow, how we want you to set up the lights, starting with your key light first with the other lights off. Set your key light, the key light, and your aperture, because we're going to say to you, set your aperture at this range. So you got to set your aperture there, and then you got to move your key light in and out to get the exposure proper. That's foreign to a lot of you guys. So you're going to have a lot of problems with that, where it's the key light and your aperture. Those 2 things work together to set your overall exposure. Once you have your aperture set to where it looks good in your LCD and your histogram, you turn your key light off, you turn your backlight on, and the backlight's job, the key light provides 70-90% of overall illumination for the shot. You should be able to expose your entire shot, which is your key light. You turn that off, turn your backlight on. The backlight's entire job is to separate the objects and people from the background. So that's all it's doing. It's helping create 3-dimensional depth and 2-dimensional plane by separating the background and the foreground. And so once you have that set, you turned it off, turn that off, turn your key light and fill light on. The fill light fills in the shadow areas in the background and midground that your key light is creating. So your fill light's entire job is to fill in the shadow areas. That's why it's called a fill light. So once you have that set, so that, and if you look at the histogram and you pan your fill light back and forth, you can see the histogram change shape when you're looking at that. So once you have all 3 of those, once you have those key and fill turned on, you turn your backlight on, do final tweaking until the image looks good to your eye. Above everything else, it should always look good to your eye. And again, we talk about that using your eye. If it looks too dark or too bright, it's under or overexposed. If it looks too blue or too orange, the white balance is off. If it looks crooked, it's crooked. If it looks out of focus, it's out of focus. So you got to start using your eye. So it's important that you understand how to do that lighting workflow, and we walk you through that. And then we go through some stuff on the newer light kit. Again, here's the color temperatures. When you got both of them turned all the way to the right, it's 4400. You're using all 660 LED bulbs, and it's 280 watts of light coming out of this. When you're at 3200 degrees, when you got the top one turned to the right, bottom one turned to the left, you're at 3200 degrees Kelvin, and you're only using half the LED bulbs, and you're at 140 watts of light coming out of this. And when you have the top one turned to the left and the bottom one turned to the right, you're at 5600 degrees, again, only using half the lights. And then we talk about 3-point lighting. I show you where the lights go. There's a whole video on 3-point lighting, the basics of 3-point lighting on here. And I talk about each of the lights, what they do, and how to do the workflow. We talk about using available light outside once you start shooting outside, exterior lighting, and using your 5-in-1 reflector, which you can use inside to help bounce light. You don't have to have your fill light. You can use your reflector and then use your fill light to light up the background a little bit more. And then there's some links in here about how to shoot in direct sun, how to shoot in B-roll. This is really for more week 2. And then we talk about how cinematography is all about lighting. Cinematography means painting with light. So especially indoors or outdoors, it's all about having good light. So I can't stress that enough. There's a whole infographic on here about 3-point lighting, how to do 3-point lighting with different lights and reflectors and stuff. There's also a ton of information in here that I just put in here this month. These are resources. There are 3 great tutorials from Studio Binder, Premium Beat, and No Film School. Those are 3 outstanding blogs and websites you need to get to know. Just look at this. This is the lighting tutorial from No Film School. This is like 36 different articles and videos on everything you wanted to know about lighting. It goes on to a second page even. So it's an incredible resource for you to get to know. If you look at Studio Binder's tutorial on here, it's just as good. It goes through film lighting techniques, and it breaks it down into what is standard, a standard breakdown for lighting. It talks about 3-point lighting, types of cinematic lighting, soft lighting, hard lighting, motivated lighting, natural lighting, best lighting books. Now, again, this class isn't about teaching how to light. You're going to have a whole lighting class. But because cinematography is all about lighting, the more you get into lighting, the better you're going to be. And lighting is just like your camera. You got to go out and practice with it to be good at it. And then at the bottom down here, I also have 10 great videos on lighting from different really well-known bloggers that I like. Again, aggregated. And then I have the ARRI handbook and for LEDs, and the ARRI handbook for tungsten, and the Kino Flow handbooks. These are just references for you. They talk a little bit about things like the quality of light, hard light versus soft light, and all that stuff. But it also gets you thinking about other lighting gear. ARRI and Kino are 2 of the most used lights in the industry. So make sure that you spend some time and play around with that. Again, it's really, most of that stuff is there for your own reference. And then we go through the whole thing in here about exposure, white balance, and focus. I go through all of this all over again, what everything is, multiple information. So you'll hear me go through things all over on this. There's a whole thing in here, how to read the histogram. I just did a video that I'll post up here as well about how to read the histogram. There's stuff on zebra and zebra point. We show you examples of that on the histogram, how to tell. You should be able to look at your histogram and tell whether or not you're exposed properly just by looking at your histogram. And I have a video on that as well. Prime versus zoom lenses, f-stops, the exposure triangle. We've talked about this and how it's different. And then there's a whole thing in here, shutter speed. There's a video I did on shutter speed in here. And then ISO, there's a whole thing about ISO and base and native ISO and picture profiles from Alistair Chapman, how to use ND filters. Here's the chart I was telling you about. This is the chart you need to use. I would highly recommend that you take a still photo of this on your cell phone because you're going to be using this chart over and over again. This converts Z numbers to millimeters. It's every 5 Z numbers. It doesn't hit every one, so you have to kind of, extrapolate the numbers. It just has to be close. The thing to remember about this is from 35 millimeters to 70 millimeters on these numbers. It's the same number. Z numbers and millimeters are the same. They go off on the extreme ends. So from 35 to 70 is exactly the same. I talked to you about what millimeters here's a great infographic, my favorite infographic on color temperature. Get to know that, download it. And then we go through the proprietary workflow all over again. There's an article on the Zen of white balance that goes through that, how to do the white balance workflow in the Sony FF5. This is another document that just walks you through how to do that. Um, it's pretty simple. It has all the switches and stuff on here, so if you have any questions about it, it walks you through and shows you what everything does and how to do the white balance workflow. It's a little bit more concise. It shows you different color temperatures and stuff. Again, it's a lot of repeat information. There's a whole video in here about how to do it, and I also did a very concise version of this on white balance, where it walks you through the 6 different steps for white balancing the camera, doing the workflow. Really, this is only like a 3 or 4 page, and there's the infographic again. You'll see a lot of repeat information in here because we want you to really get this from a lot of different angles. So don't be intimidated by this. Here's your white card that you make sure you found this white card in the outside side pouch of your camera. And there's some tips and tricks on this. So this just gets you ready for the shooting assignment. This is just the precursor for the shooting assignment in week 1. And this is the shooting assignment. I just want to show you what this looks like. Here's your assignment overview. This is really important. Here's the response and the reply, examples of what those are. And then we go through what the shot is, okay? This is what the shot is going to look like. And here's what it's all about. You have a foreground object, which is your focal point, a midground object, which is at least 1 or 2 feet behind it, kind of close by, and then a background object. All 3 of the objects need to work together, layers, foreground, midground, background. All 3 of them need to work together to tell a story. And you can see this is a Harry Potter themed one, and they do a pretty good job on this. This is in focus, this is slightly out of focus, and this is pretty out of focus. There are specific requirements for how to shoot this, how to frame it, what aperture, what focal length you shoot at, how far away each of those things are. You're going to have 4 things that you're going to need to turn into me. A camera report, we'll show you what that looks like, where you take all the information in your viewfinder and you transpose it to the camera report, including the A, B, and preset white balance that we just went through. You're going to have 3 shots of the same shot. So you'll have 3 shots of this, but you'll record 30 seconds of A white balance, 30 seconds of B white balance, and 30 seconds of preset white balance. And then with the camera set up for the preset, you're going to record a cell phone shot of the close-up of the viewfinder with 13 different things up in it. And then you're going to take a few steps back and shoot a wide shot of the entire scene, showing me the camera and tripod, all 3 lights, the distance from the camera to the subject, and the midground to the background. I need to see all that. Again, make sure all 3 layers work together to tell a story. Don't just have random items in it. Here's a George Martin thing who did the Game of Thrones, and he also wrote a bunch of books about werewolves. So this is a werewolf-based one, George Martin. Again, we go through the overview. You're going to be shooting 30 to 40-second clips and then importing that into Premiere Pro and grabbing stills of that. You make sure you read that assignment first before you do that. Foreground focal point, this can be a cup of coffee or a hot tea or other objects, and I show you a ton of examples in here. Your midground, this can be books or cameras or any other objects, should be slightly out of focus, 1 to 2 feet at least behind the foreground object. And then your background, this is going to be 6 to 12 feet away from your midground object. And again, you can move that forward and back to determine how in focus or out of focus it is to help you tell the story. You'll need to make sure the cup, the books, or other items in the midground and the background all work together to tell a story. Don't just, that's the 3rd time I've told you that in this. Backgrounds are just as important as your foreground. So you got to put a lot of thought in every shot you shoot in this class. I'm going to be judging you on how well you use your backgrounds. So just know that the background should do 4 things. They're just as important as the focal point you shoot. The backgrounds help create depth in the shot, help enhance the story you're telling, help balance out the image if it's asymmetrical, and help make the image more visually interesting. Shot Designer app helps to lean out. You'll be using Shot Designer down the road in Fundamentals of Production 1. You will have to use that. Shot Designer is one of my favorite apps, by the way. Here's the shot setup. And again, it doesn't have to be a cup and stuff. Here's a cup. Here's one talking about NFL. I almost didn't put this in because of the team. But, pay attention to the rule of thirds. And when you're looking at this, we tell you how to frame this. Okay, so if you look at this, the shot setup. First, set up the focal point, the cup or the object here in the foreground. This should have the most visual weight in the shot. By by putting the top of the cup close to the top horizontal line of the rule of thirds grid. Here's the top of the cup. Here's the top horizontal line of the rule of thirds grid. Next, make sure the left vertical line of the rule of thirds grid is going right through the cup. We ask that you not put the handle straight so that it's flat, but you either put it out or to the back, depending on the cup. You can have it on the right side as well if there's only thing. But again, it doesn't have to be a cup. And then we want you to, once you have that set up, then you build the rest of your shot. You put everything in place. We don't want you to cut off the bottom of the cup, but we don't want to have too much space down here. It should be well proportioned. Again, this needs to have the most visual weight in the shot, and it needs to be in focus. You can see the red peaking around the edges here. This needs to be slightly out of focus, and this needs to be out of focus in the background. Now, it's up to you how you arrange all these things, but we want to see composition is the artful arrangements of objects and people within a frame. The artful arrangement of objects and people within the frame. That's what composition is. So you need to know how to do that. And then we talk about the camera should be slightly higher than the cup so you can see right into the back of the cup if you're using a cup. But if you have it too high, you're going to cut off the background. We don't want you to do that. You want to see just over the top of the cup. You got to do the lighting workflow, starting with your key light first, then your backlight, then your key and fill light. Here are the technical specs for the shot. You're going to be shooting this between Z75 and 75 millimeters to Z95, 102 millimeters. Don't shoot it at the extreme ends. Your aperture is going to be between f6.3 and f11. So we ask you to start at Z85 here and f8 here. That way, if you, and this is different. So instead of, you have to set the camera up for Z85, and then you need to move the camera back and forth until you get the framing for the shot. You can't zoom in and out. You got to physically move the camera back and forth. Same thing for the aperture. You set your aperture to f8 once you have your shot set up, and then you move your key light in and out to get the exposure at f8. And so once you do that, when you get down to the final end where you're doing final tweaking, you'll have about 10 millimeters where you can zoom in and out to really adjust it, fine tune it, and you'll have about a half stop on either side of the f8 to adjust your aperture only without moving your key light to really bring that in. 3-point lighting, key light, fill light, backlight. They're all very specific places. Asymmetrical framing, offset to one side. Symmetrical is right down the middle. Asymmetrical is off to one side. Problem with asymmetrical framing is you got to fill in the other side so that it's not unbalanced. Camera height slightly higher in the cup. Distance from the subject to the camera, the coffee cup, 4 to 8 feet. Distance from the cup to the books, at least 1 to 2 feet. Do not put the books on the same layer as the cup. We want to see the book slightly out of focus. Think about overlapping the books in the cup and make sure you use the rule of thirds grid with us of the midground object of the image. Distance from the midground objects to the background at least 6 to 12 feet. Color temperature is going to be based on where you have the LED set up. Camera's locked down on a tripod. The lens height, like you said, slightly higher than the coffee cup. Make sure you can see depth in the background and that you're not shooting too high and cutting that off. Here's another example. This is telling me a story about travel photography. So you can see how it is. This has the most visual weight in the shot. This needed to be a little bit farther back, but it did a pretty good job, and I would have probably raised this up so I saw a little bit of the lighting behind that. Adjusting the aperture and focal length, we talked about that. So you need to move the camera back and forth and iris up and down. I'm completely lost. Will it come together as I work down this time? Yes, it will. Again, like I said, it's a lot of information for you, but as you go through this, this walks you through step by step how to do this. And then we talk about, setting the, focal length and setting the aperture and how to move that back and forth. And then we talk about making sure that you're using your eyes. Like I say here, you know what looks good and what looks bad in an image. It's mostly common sense. If the shot looks too dark, it's underexposed. If it looks too bright, it's overexposed. If it looks too crooked, it's crooked. If it looks too orange or too blue, the white balance is off and it looks out of focus. Well, it's out of focus. It's common sense. But what happens is this weird phenomenon happens when you start shooting, that common sense goes out the door. So you actually consciously have to be thinking about this as you shoot. Am I too bright or too dark? Am I too orange or too blue? Am I in focus or out of focus? Am I crooked or straight? So you need to be thinking about that. Let me go back into that. Come on. Let's see here. And when we go back down here, okay, so here's another example. It was about music. So they have a donut cup in the foreground, which you lost some points on because it didn't all tie together. But a computer with a music thing and music and a guitar. See how this works. Don't cut off the bottom of the cup. Just be careful about that. We have an overhead diagram how everything is laid out for you. Here's the camera. Here's your key light, 60 to 80 degrees off axis here. Here's your fill light. I show you what the key light should be lighting. I show you what the fill light should be lighting, the background and the midground. Here's your backlight. You can see how close that is into the shot. It's lighting the back of the cup and the back of the books. The distance between the cup to the midground is at least 1 to 2 feet. The cup to the camera, 4 to 6 feet. The distance from the background to the midground, 6 to 12 feet. So from the midground here to the background, 6 to 12 feet. And again, that you move that back and forth. So this is how everything needs to be lined up. Key light on this side, fill light on this side, backlight lighting up the back of the cup on this side. So if it's not like that, you lose points. And then I walk you through step 1, step 2, step 3, step 4, step 5, step 6. Walk you through that. I talked to you about how to set up your exposure if there's anything white in the shot. 7 and 8, I walk you through the lighting workflow one more time, and then we go through the white balance workflow one more time. 1, 2, 3, 4, and this 4-step process. Then we record all your shots, 30 seconds of each. Here's another one that's a cat themed, and you can see how well this looks. Got cat photo in the background, cat cups, and a cat thing. Here's what you're going to deliver to me. You're going to do a lockdown shot of each of the 3 shots. A white balance, B white balance, preset white balance. And then with it set up for preset, you're going to shoot a close-up shot of the viewfinder that has 13 things in it, including the preset white balance and the focus number that only appears once you adjust the front focus ring. So this is what your assignment template is going to look like. As you shoot, you have a printed out copy of the camera report that you need to be filling out. You only be filling out 1 line. This is what your camera report should look like. Do not give me 3 lines with 3 different, you're shooting the same thing. All I need to see is 1 line with 3 different white balance numbers in it. Don't fill out 3 different lines for the 3 different white balance settings. 1 line, 3 different white balance settings. We'll show you what that looks like. While in the wide shot, you shoot a behind the scene shot. Here's your viewfinder. So you should have the Z number up here, XAVC 1080 24p50, your zebra 2 up, and the zebra point needs to be in your histogram for 90%. You're peeking on, and you can see in this particular photo, you can see they're a little bit too close to the books. So you can see the red peeking around the edges of the cup. They were supposed to set the focus right here. But you can also see this. I shouldn't see this much peeking on the midground. You got your steady shot off. You got your manual focus on, and you're 7.6 feet away from the camera. You got to be able to see this. Again, this number only appears in the viewfinder after you adjust your front focus ring. Only stays up for 3 seconds after you stop adjusting it. So you got to be really quick to get this in the viewfinder screenshot. Picture profile 2, f8, ISO 640, 148, 3500. Make sure your shotgun mic is plugged in and working. I should see a couple little ticks here in the audio meter. If I don't, you'll get points taken off. And then your white, if there's anything white in the shot, it needs to be close to the left side of this yellow line. I shouldn't see anything on the right side of this yellow line. So that's your viewfinder screenshot. It should look just like this. Now, I would have moved this cup over a little bit. He lost some points because he wasn't quite up against here, and that vertical line should have come right through here a little bit more. So he lost a little bit of points here. Again, here's the viewfinder screenshot. Here's what the wide shot should look like. I need to see the camera and the tripod, the distance between the camera and the cup, where all 3 lights are, and these lights are a little too low and a little too far away. And then the distance between the cup and the midground and the midground and the background. So I need to see all that in the last thing. And then here's the 13 things you need up in the viewfinder. 13 different things, and the directions for all these. I give you some tips about how to shoot this. This needs to change to 6 feet, not 10 feet. Sorry, I forgot that one. You must have 3-point lighting. I go through the key light. So again, a lot of repetitive stuff. Here's what it should look like. Again, I give you lots of different examples of this. Here's the camera report elements. I talked to you about how to do the camera reports. There's a whole, you can print this out. This is a single page camera report that you can practice with. I would highly suggest you practice before you go through all this. And then there is also a FS5 camera report guide that walks you through how to do the camera reports. Fill out the camera reports as you're shooting. Make sure you proofread the camera reports before you turn it in. Here's another one that's not using a coffee cup, but you can see how well they did on that. Here's the chart again for converting the Z numbers to millimeters. We talk about focal lengths. Here's another one with the Lord of the Rings as a thing. Avoid shooting at the extreme ends of the lens. Here's one about religious themed. Um, and then here's how to export your template. When you're exporting this as a PDF, you're going to get this to come up and it's going to say best, good, better, best. Make sure it's a best PDF. That's what you got to turn into me. Everything in this class has to be a PDF. Here's another great one I really like. This is telling me a story about the dog eating the shoe. You got the dog in the background. I think the dog's a little out of focus. I would have probably put the dog a little bit more in focus so we can see it, and it's a little dark, but really good. Here's a whole rubric for week 1 that we go through that walks you through how I grade this, and you can see it's very detailed about how it's being graded. If you look at the and each week I give you a rubric. Week 2 and week 3, it's the pre-visualization workflow and the visual checklist we'll be going through. Here's the assignment template. This is what you turn into me. This is the pages document. And here's an example of that while we're waiting for that to come up. Here's an example of what it looks like. Don't cut and paste this because it's a different one, and I will know that you cut and pasted it. So this is an old version of this. Don't use that one either. So this is what it should look like. Just one line. F-stop, feet. You got to make sure that, see everything in red up here? You got to make sure that those prefixes and suffixes, which are called industry standard nomenclature, are written just like this. For example, he lost some points here because he had a small SO here on the ISO. It needs to be capitalized. So they lost some points there. And then this is a white balance workflow. You got to make sure you got a capital K behind each of these things. And you got to make sure you finish it up by bolding the number that you selected to use out of the 3. This is exactly what it should look like. You lost some points here because this is a small Z number instead of a capital Z. I just want to point that out to you. Don't do a small Z. Don't do a small K. Don't do a small ISO. It's got to look just like this up here. ISO capital, all this. 1/48th of a second, ISO 640. This has got to match your camera report, and it's got to be according to the assignment directions. This is not according to the assignment directions. This is supposed to be, I think, Z75 to Z95, and it's off. So on this particular one, he lost 5 points here because he's got the F11. He was within the zone here. 4 to 6 feet away from the cameras to the subject, 148. He lost 5 points here because he had a Z42 instead of Z75, Z95. He lost a point here because of the Z. He lost a point here because of the ISO, and everything else was great on this. So that's the camera report. Here's 4 different versions of this. Again, he lost some points because of the Z numbers here. He's missing his focus number here. Notice that. And he's got Zebra 1 up in his viewfinder instead of Zebra 2. So he lost some points here. So don't do this. I actually need to take this down and not have this one in here because it's got so many mistakes. And then here's his behind the scenes shot. So that's how you do that. So just be aware of that. Also he lost some points here because see how he's got the shutter in auto? You shouldn't see an A in front of your f-stop ISO or shutter speed at all. He's got no audio going on in his audio meters here, so he lost some points here. He's got a zebra set for 70 instead of 90, so you can see they're white on the right side of that, so I really need to change that in the assignment example. Not a great assignment example. If we look at the pages document, this is, again, each week I give you in the assignment template, there's a concise set of directions. Here's all the viewfinder screenshot and the technical information, making sure you don't forget to proof your work. Here are the deliverables with the due date Sunday night at midnight. Here's the diagram again. Here's your color temperature infographic. And then you just need to fill this in. So you just write in this and write down the numbers, and then you drag and drop your images in. So if you go into your Finder and you just go to wherever you have the image, let's say this is my image, for example, you just grab this and you drag it and drop it right on top of that, and it automatically shows up in there. That's how you do that. So really simple. And then down here, this is A, B preset, and then A, B preset, and then your viewfinder screenshot. Make sure it's close. A close-up and it's exposed and focused properly, and then you do the behind-the-scenes wide shot here. And then when you're done with all this, you simply go up here and go File, Export to PDF, and then you save it as a best quality PDF, and then it will ask you where you want to save it to. That's how you do it. Okay, that's it. Any questions? Okay, I'm completely lost. Are we required to have audio? Because since I have followed the instructions for this week, my screen display shows the volume bar, but no feedback shown when speaking. Okay, so do you have your shotgun mic plugged into channel 1 in the back? And if you do, yes, you do. I'm going to stop recording this right now. Hold on.